Welcome back to A Journey Through Time, the Darkcast. We're here with part 2 of our recap / theorizing for season 3. I'm here with the same crew, minus Maury, but he might show up a little bit later, so we'll see. I think we're going to jump right into it. Our plan is to kind of do a quick recap of season 2, kind of just go episode by episode and quick overview of the things that happen, and then once we get through, maybe that's 10-15 minutes, then we'll try and expand on that, theorize on the full story of what we know so far, and get moving.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. Yeah,
cool. Chris, would you be interested in starting us off with the first episode of season 2?
Oh yeah, definitely. So season 2 kicks off in the year 1921. And this is the first time we're introduced to this year in the entire show. I believe it's June 21st as well. Yep. So June 21st, 1921, and we see two individuals, we're not sure who they are, but they're using a pickaxe in the cave, so it appears that they're building the tunnel that leads to the wormhole, or whatever you want to call it. One of them is Bartosz, as we know, or I guess we don't know with certainty.
It's never confirmed in the show, but it has been confirmed externally via the director's Instagram and that actor's Instagram.
Way to go, Bartosz.
Yeah, they pretty much gave it away.
Yeah.
But
I hadn't seen that yet. I didn't know. So this is the guy who gets pickaxed at the beginning is supposed to be Bartosz, or is confirmed to be Bartosz?
Striking resemblance.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like when the first time I saw him in that first episode, I was like, "Wow, that guy looks a lot like Bartosz," and then he got murked immediately.
I never put that whole thing together.
The second time, yes, but the first time I was like, "Oh."
I knew he had to be. I knew he had to be related somehow, but I never put together who it actually was.
Yeah. Right. Well, and once in that scene, he actually says ask Adam why he took you in and why he called you Noah to the other guy. So then you're like, oh shit, that other guy is young Noah,
right? Which
is pretty hype.
Yeah. The other young man is Noah, who's a lot younger than Bartosz. So it's middle-aged Bartosz and young Noah, and Bartosz is pretty convinced that Noah is sent by Adam to kill him, and kind of encourages Noah to question Adam. But then he gets pickaxed. I think through the shoulder blade?
Yeah, it's like right next to the neck, shoulder neck.
He just chops him with it.
If you've ever seen Troy, when Achilles fights Boagrius in that opening scene, it's in that location.
You had the name and everything. So good.
Anyway, different.
Welcome back to the Troy cast. Talking all things Brad Pitt.
So right after that first scene where younger Noah kills Bartosz, we're taken to a quick scene where we see Noah, adult Noah, looking at his little notebook that tells him everything about what's going to happen ever, all the time. And it says June 27th, 2020, beginning of the last cycle. And then we're taken all the way to 2051. And Jonas is,
2053.
Thank you, Alex. In the future. And he's looking around, seeing what's going on, and he finds a tape recording of Claudia talking about surviving the apocalypse, and the apocalypse is on June 27th, 2020. And she's talking about the God particle. I think this is the first time we hear it called the God particle.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and so after we see that, we're taken back to June 21st, 2020, which, FYI, is, as we just found out, 6 days before the apocalypse. And a new character is introduced, Clausen, and he is the new badass cop
And he gives some weird metaphor about an elephant.
Yo, Jurgen has the best clapback to his elephant metaphor in the world. He's like, yo, my son's been missing for 7 months. When I need to find an elephant, I'll fucking call you. Let's go. I was like, oh, shit. Jurgen, I love it.
So Clausen is there to figure out what's going on in Vinden. He thinks he's going to be able to solve everything, but also in the background, he's looking for his missing brother. And he thinks whoever murdered him is in the town of Vinden.
For reasons that we'll find out about later.
Correct. Right now, keep your season 2, episode 1 hats on, even though you've probably seen the whole series.
Quick recap.
Yeah. And then, Katerina is also having a tough time. Like, we can tell she's very frantic. Both Ulrich and Mads are Mikkel, are missing.
To be fair, Mads is also missing.
Andrew.
We also find out that Regina got really bad cancer.
Yes.
It got
we see that
to a
she
point
has
where
lost
she's
her
lost
hair.
all her hair with the chemo and on her deathbed.
Yeah, that's right. She has essentially no hair and looks pretty mangled up. Yeah. Forgot about that. That's episode 1. Another flashback to 2053, and Jonas is walking to the church, and we can see all of those graves with all the different names. So right off the bat, we're kind of, given hints as to who's dead in the future. Some pretty big names like Alexander Tiedemann and Martha.
And Jankowski and Voller, who are the 2 police officers. The one-eyed guy and the other lady.
Everybody knows the one-eyed guy.
One-eyed guy.
Yeah. And I'm struggling to see what other big plot points. Oh, I think Hannah. Yeah, that's right. Hannah finds, doesn't find, but opens up that box that contains Alexander Tiedemann's passport. Yeah, his ID with his real name and the gun. And she, I believe, tries to kill herself, at which point older Jonas walks in, and she's like, yo, who the fuck are you? Right? Like, I'm trying to kill myself. You're walking up in this bitch.
Where'd you get that key from?
Yeah, I think she specifically asks
and
him.
And he goes, it's my key. It's mine.
I
live here.
Surprise! I'm back, but
then
way
he
older.
also convinces her with the scar and the burn mark. Which, when he said that, I was like, uh-oh. He knows exactly where he is, and she's going to be totally mind blown. Yeah. When he's like, I know there's a burn mark over by the stove. It's from
when Dad spilled oil on when he was making pancakes or something.
Yeah.
And he also mentions the scar on his arm that he got from riding a yellow bike, which is interesting.
Yeah, the colors.
Lots of colors in this episode.
That's interesting because it's specifically mentioned.
Yeah.
It's a memory that's being described.
Yeah, remember that yellow bike you guys got me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I guess I do.
Yeah, instead of actually seeing it, that's one of the examples that's just auditory.
Yeah.
You know what else? You know what else I forgot to mention is Elizabeth finds that photo of Sigmundus in H.G. Tannhaus's book.
Yeah, in his little shop, yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. So that also happens episode 1. And she points out, I think, to her mother/daughter, however you want to talk about
Spoilers.
that one of those people in the photo is Noah. And that just confuses the shit out of her mom's daughter.
We also see earlier on too the older version of Elizabeth killing people who went into the dead zone at the nuclear plant.
French people who went into the dead zone. All those guys are speaking French, which is fascinating.
Yeah. And
I'll explain that a little bit more later.
That's a quick recap of episode 1. Who wants to do episode 2?
One last thing with that. Jonas finds the dark mass in the power plant at the very end of the episode.
The God particle.
He sees the God particle for the first time.
Oh yeah, recall to the start of the episode. That's how the episode ends. Is him actually seeing and finding that God particle. Good catch, Colby. Yep.
I think they also introduce Adam in this episode? Do we actually see Adam?
Yes,
I think so.
I believe so.
And he's saying some wild shit, but we'll get into that once we do a little deeper dive. Let's do the full season 2
He doesn't have much
recap
screen
first,
time
and then
in episode 1.
Yeah.
He was introduced.
When we also see that Elizabeth talks a lot of the same things that Noah talked about too, which was her husband at some point. So it's not surprising, but it's interesting to see that comparison of her talking about how their only hope is the passage to paradise.
Man, so much shit happens in episode 1.
yeah, the book. There's a book that Elizabeth finds in Tannhouse's shop.
Mm-hmm.
Not the one that has the picture in it, but the one that she's looking at before that has like a big
Lunar solar cycle.
there's like a painting on it with
Save that for theories.
Oh,
Save that for theories.
that thing's amazing. I'm just
Yeah.
teasing it now. We'll
Yeah.
get there.
The poster comes up again in a further episode. I
Yes, it
remember.
does.
And the season 3 trailer.
Yeah, that thing is super relevant. We'll
Yeah.
get into it. But let's move on to episode 2 for now, and we'll quickly recap that and try and get going here.
So, Alex, do you want to do episode 2?
Sure.
All right.
So episode 2 of season 2 is titled Dark Matter. We open the episode with Jonas in 2053 in the power plant, and he's listening to a cassette that Claudia has made, and he's like figuring out how to stabilize the God particle in the power plant, and he gets it stable for a second, and then the machine that is supplying the power to the thing runs out of gas and shuts down, and so it destabilizes again. And then we cut to June 22nd, 1987, 5 days before the apocalypse. We see Mikkel wake up, and he says that it's his mother's birthday, and Enos says we just have to forget and live for now rather than dwell on the past. And then we see middle Claudia, 1987 Claudia, entering the power plant, and she is delaying a meeting with the French delegation in order to talk to Bernd, the head guy of the power plant.
The former head guy.
Well, yes, former head guy. She took over. When middle Claudia gets to the power plant, she delays a meeting with the French delegation with her secretary, and her secretary tells her, "Oh, there's a lady in your office. I didn't know about the dog, blah, blah, blah." So we think, oh, the owner of this dog has come to get her dog back. And when she gets there, we see old Claudia that we met in the first season. And so we know, oh, shit, we're meeting our former selves at this point.
Yo, that was one of the best scenes of season 2 for me, was middle-aged Claudia meeting her older self, and like the old Claudia being like, "Oh, that is my dog."
Yeah.
And then her saying like, "I remember this conversation," and then tells her to like
Yeah.
look out the door and like
Yeah.
tells her like everything that happens with the people
Yeah.
going on
Yeah.
outside.
Which
It's
is
dope.
a boss way
Oof.
of telling another person that you know exactly what's going to happen.
What
It's
number
just
am I thinking of?
calling it
13!
out. Exactly.
Yeah, she's going to walk across the room and fan her face, and that guy's going to
and that's
check out her butt.
That's a big turning point for Claudia.
Oh, she's on board after that.
After that, she's kind of off the chain, and we'll get into that. But she's never the same after that moment.
Well, and I would like to reference Alex's color theory. She has 2 different colored eyes, which is more prevalent in this season than the first season, because I didn't really notice in the first season, and then this scene kind of
Yeah.
amplifies. She has one blue eye and one yellow eye, which is
Well, blue and brown, but yeah.
brown, yellow.
Yeah.
Colors.
So from there we see Egon Tiedemann retired. So this is still 87, and he finally goes to interview Helga, who is apparently living in the mental facility now. which I guess that happens after the car crash at the end of season 1. He just stays in the mental facility for the rest of those 33 years and becomes old Helga. Yeah, he's in the beginning stages of his dementia. And he still isn't really giving answers to Egon. He's a little too scrambled to actually give him any info.
Yeah.
And then in 2020, we see Clausen starts interviewing Regina, and she talks about all the stuff that the stranger Jonas left at the hotel, and so it kind of gives Clausen and Charlotte more information into this case.
Ooh, interesting parallel there of a police officer interviewing a person who is health compromised. Kind of fun. 2 scenes back to back.
And then we find out next that the stranger Jonas is actually taking Hannah to like prove to her about time travel and stuff like that. So he takes her to the cave, and they end up traveling back to 1987.
Yeah, he said, Stranger Jonas said that in the past he was trying to keep it a secret, and that's what caused all of this to be destroying us in the first place, the secrets. And so
Oh yeah.
he says that
Dude,
he's
I
gonna...
love the theory. It's just the Lügen, the lies that lead to all of these issues.
Und Geheimnisse.
So, and he could have taken her back and showed her and proved to her that was another time. But he had to go and show her Mikkel and be like, there's the missing child.
Yeah, now you see
why, like,
Mikkel was dead.
yeah.
Well, and it's also interesting because it shows in 1987, like the next scene is Mikkel by the caves.
Right.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
because Mikkel was about to travel back, but they didn't actually run into each other or anything.
Yeah.
And he runs into Noah because Noah like stops him from
Yeah,
running
from
into
entering into the cave.
because they would
Yeah.
have run into each other,
Yeah,
but
such a classic
because
scene. He's
Eating
just
an apple.
Always eating an apple with the knife too, not
Yeah.
even just like a.
it's
normal
such a
fork.
savage way to eat an apple.
which we'll get into the wallpaper in the bunker as well. With apples have to do with that. We'll see.
Apples are red.
Hedgehogs have
and
apples.
Mikkel asks Noah, what if God's plan is wrong? What if God is wrong? And Noah says that God is never wrong. Sometimes we just need faith and that things will get better. So it's kind of an interesting character thing for Noah, especially considering how we know how he kind of devolves through the season.
So Jonas takes Hannah back in time, and then Claudia takes younger Claudia back in time as well, right?
Does she actually take her back in time, or does
I don't
she?
think
She
so.
No.
takes her to the cave with all the drums.
Yeah.
And then like says a bunch of sketchy stuff, saying like everything will happen the way it has always happened.
Oh, and then she
And then she-
disappears.
and then she jumps.
Yeah,
Time
she
travel.
time.
Older
And
her
she also
time
gives
travel.
her a map for her backyard of where to dig up
Yeah.
That's
the
right.
time travel, the
Yeah,
time machine.
and she goes and digs that shit up
In
Yeah.
1953.
Right, because
Yeah,
old
yeah.
Claudia goes and buries it in 54. 54.
Yes.
And then,
And
yeah,
then it's dug
middle
up in the
Claudia
80s.
digs it up in 87.
Yeah.
53.
54.
Oh, brutal.
The
That damn 7-month jump.
that scene of her digging up the box is part of the intro for the season.
Oh, is that in the...
Yeah.
Oh, dude, the opening credits are wild for both seasons.
Yeah.
Well, and we also see Egon goes to visit Ulrich from jail, and they call him in 1987. So Ulrich's been there for 33 years.
Oh, dude, the
Um,
casting for old Ulrich.
Oh, it's
so young. Oh, no, legit. When I was watching it with my roommate, he was disappointed because he was like, "Oh, they just got the same actor. Like they didn't even. I wish they had cast a different guy." I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
you're gonna be so happy because it's a different guy."
Yeah, no, I was watching with one of my friends, and they said, "What? They just brought in the same actor and put old makeup on?" I was like, "No, it's
They
crazy to
look
think about.
shockingly alike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
when it's interesting." And he's called the inspector in the mental hospital,
Right.
and he continues to say, "My only aim is to take many lives. The more I take, the better I feel."
Yeah.
To Egon, kind of trying to reference like, "Hey, I'm from the future."
I'm that guy. You fucked up.
Yeah.
Ooh, also the nurse that admits Egon to the mental health facility is going to come into play in season 3.
What was her name?
I don't know, but she is Katerina's mother.
What?
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
The nurse who crosses her arms in a very similar to the way to the way Greta Doppler crosses her arms in the first season, and they both abuse their kids, which is interesting.
Yeah, Katarina crosses her arms at some point. Though I'm picturing her doing
She definitely does
Yeah.
that at some point. Interesting. Good call.
Well, she crosses her arms a lot, like when she goes down to the bunker and they try to tell her like what's
Yeah.
going on.
that. Yeah,
Yo,
she
that
has, like,
scene in the
this
bunker is
stance.
hilarious.
That was one of my favorite scenes.
And who the fuck is this guy?
Oh, so perfect.
And I think that's most of the stuff that happened in episode
That's
2.
yeah. That's
Ooh,
most
no,
of
no,
it.
no,
Regina,
there's still-
Regina and Alexander meet. I think that's the first time they meet, and he's like, "Yo, I want a job." She's like, "Get out of here." He's like, "No, I really want a job." She's like, "Okay, here you go. You can do me little favors."
And the other big thing is Jonas is hung this episode in
Yeah,
in
Yeah,
2053.
yeah. Oh, that's Colby. Thank you for remembering that. Yeah.
Elizabeth.
So
right?
by
yeah.
Elizabeth he gets caught sneaking into
The dead zone.
to see the God particle again,
Mhm.
which she has forbid. But at the last second, Elizabeth saves him.
Yeah. Shoots him down.
Yeah,
Shoots the
'cause
rope.
She knows who he is too.
When that and
She
that
must.
Yeah,
and that actually leads Elizabeth's right hand girl. I don't what's her name? You said
Celia?
Celia. To actually let him, because he gets put in a cage after that,
right.
and she lets him out of the cage and is like, "Why didn't she kill you? Like, what's the special thing
Who are
about you?"
you?
Because
Yeah.
she's probably seen Elizabeth kill so many
Yeah.
people at this point.
And at that
Um,
point, she's like, "Yo, take me to the frickin' God particle.
Yeah, show me what's there. Why are we
Yeah.
hiding
Well,
it?
because
Show
before
us
Jonas
what
gets
you got."
before Jonas gets shot down, he says the passage will never open. The paradise is lies, so it might like start seeds of dissent in her.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that's how the episode ends. Is he
When
shows
they go through and he stabilizes it
He-
for a second, and then
he,
He
shows
enters.
through.
He
He's
walks
like,
through it,
Yo,
and
I
then
don't
it-
give a shit. I don't know what's gonna happen, but I'm gonna jump in.
And then she yells his name. She yells Jonas like as he's going through the portal. So she seemingly knows his name, even though she doesn't know why he's important. So that's kind of an interesting.
Cecilia?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then it distorts itself again, right?
Mhm.
As soon
It
as he
Did
gets-
destabilizes.
she know his
destabilizes.
name? Did he ever tell?
No,
No.
that's the thing. He never told her his name. I don't think his name was
Oh,
ever said, but she yells
interesting.
Jonas when he goes through
I
the
never
portal.
knew that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great little tidbit there. I like
Yeah.
that.
All right. Colby, you want to kick us off with episode 3, and we'll kind of jump in as well.
Yeah. So episode 3, we're in 1954. Young Helga is kidnapped by himself and Noah.
Well, we're actually in 1987.
It
'Cause
starts in the bunker, and you see like the fancy newer version of the chair, where instead of just like an eye shield, it's like
it's
a
the
full
circular
full
one, yeah.
circular thing. Yeah.
So in that 7 months, they must have modified the
The
time travel.
Ooh, that's when Noah has his whole
monologue.
who he does like a prayer essentially as he's sending the guy, but it's like a time God prayer. He says, "Yeah, no harm will come to you. We're watching over you. Time is always with you. Wherever you go, you carry it with you, and it carries you. It sees and hears all that you say and do." TikTok, which TikTok is like kind of the amen of. Yeah. Classic.
And then it immediately jumps to Doris and Agnes getting it.
Immediately cuts to Agnes going down on Doris. Agnes in a yellow dress, Doris in a blue dress. If you're keeping
That's
track.
for later.
And then we find out that it's June 23rd, 4 days to the apocalypse. And it cuts to Helga in 1954 walking back into his house. And Egon starts talking with his partner about not having sex in a while.
Young Egon.
In 1954, yeah.
which
54,
which is like kind of a nice setup for theories in season 3. He's like, "What are you talking about? Like, I can cheat on my wife." The guy's like, "Yeah, dude, everybody does it."
Yeah, that partner who tells him that cheating is a totally cool thing to do in the 50s is Daniel Convald, who's actually the father of Enos Convald, the nurse.
Yep.
So that's a fun little connection. Because I don't know that they ever explicitly say. They just say that his name is Daniel. They never
So
say
in
that it's
season
Convald.
3, you're telling me if Hannah and freaking
Egon get together.
Egon get it on. It's like he's doing his great grandniece or something.
I mean, everybody's related.
It doesn't matter because Enos is evil anyways, and I
Yeah.
will never give up on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Enos is a bad person.
All right,
I think
back
she's
to
part of
back to
Sigmundus.
the episode.
She's
back to
100%
episode
part of
3.
Sigmundus.
Let's see.
Oh, we see young Claudia and Tronta walking through the forest.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
she's asking about like what he was up to before he came to Winden, and he says that he was in an orphanage for a while and that his mom doesn't like to talk about what they were doing before they got here. And he says that Agnes has a brother, but they hate each other. And then Claudia asks to see his wiener, and so he pulls his pants down.
Trow, dude.
Straight up just drops his pants. But it's like it's more analytical than like sexually charged.
Yeah, yeah.
It
It's
really
like
doesn't feel
gathering
sexy at all.
information.
Yeah.
What I thought was interesting was it potentially showing a similar thing to all the cigar burns that he has on his arm.
Mm.
Like, was he showing her more scars that he had down there from
Oh, that'd be
stuff like that? Because they had just had the. 'Cause I didn't think about that the first time I watched it, but the second time I watched it, I was like, oh, maybe it's something like showing how shitty of a childhood he had.
Yeah, so my theory on those burns, they kind of look like cigar burns, but I also kind of have a theory that he's like from the future and they're like
Yeah.
inoculations of some
yeah.
kind.
That could make
Yeah.
sense.
I think that's definitely the case. We should bring that up in the theories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's not much to it. It's just I think that they're probably from the future because Agnes is part of that Sigmundus
Yeah.
cult at a certain point.
And it makes sense because Noah is, he's in the bunker, but
Yeah.
we'll go into it.
Yeah, we'll
go
get
into
there. We'll get there.
Yeah, no. So after the pulling down of the pants, we're cut to the scene of Claudia. She's staring at this time machine, and she's really starting to realize how freaking crazy the world must be. And she tells Regina, for once, that she loves her.
No, she doesn't say she loves her. She compliments her hair. She still has never said that she loves her.
Doesn't it happen
at that point.
in that later that season?
Maybe later maybe later in this. I don't know that she
Ah.
ever says she loves her. I think that's like a specific thing. She says that her hair looks nice.
Oh my gosh, what a great mother!
Also, middle Claudia wearing blue and Regina wearing yellow in that scene.
Well, and then after Claudia leaves, she's looking at the time machine still, and she remembers the book that Helga got her, and then she starts leafing through that book, and
Yeah,
That kinda
she-
gives her
and
insight
She
into
goes.
everything.
She goes to visit Helga.
She
and
goes-
she's like, "Yo, what the heck? Why did you give me this book?
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to figure out this crazy time travel shit might be real. You're crazy, but you gave me the book. I'm gonna try to get some information from you." And he kind of just says like, "Yo, no is evil. No information about the book. Just no is evil."
Yeah, he basically just says there's a battle between good and evil, between light and dark. The travelers can undo everything that happens, and if we succeed, none of it will happen.
Yeah.
And when she asks he said that's what Noah said,
Yeah.
and she says, "Who's Noah?" And he goes, "He's evil. Don't trust
Yeah,
him. Don't trust anything he says," but doesn't give us any information. And then cut to Noah walking out of the church.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't I think Claudia goes to Tannhaus's clock shop, and that's the first time in Claudia's life chronologically I think that they meet, because she wants to get a little more information about the book.
Oh, we see Agnes in a yellow dress and black hat go and meet old Claudia in the bunker,
That's right.
and
they have the whole conversation about how Agnes says she rejects her family, and Claudia says family shapes who we are. And Claudia gives Agnes something that she must do today, and we end up finding out later that it's the gun to kill Noah. Or no,
well,
it's
she gives her the newspaper
the
clipping.
the newspaper
Yeah.
clipping of
Her death.
Of her-
Claudia's own
Yeah.
death.
yeah.
Yeah, which I think is like some sort of signal to say this is what you must do now,
Yeah.
right?
Right, or like it's time for that thing we talked about
Yeah.
that we don't know
Yeah.
maybe if they talked about it. Because
Yeah.
seemingly Agnes is like double dealing between Claudia and
Hardcore.
Sigmundus.
Yeah,
100%.
certainly this scene
Hints at
makes you
that.
think that.
Because I don't think Agnes is a She's a former member of Sigmundus at this point, right? Wasn't she kicked out by Adam?
Because Noah. Well, because she basically Claudia says like Noah's back. They sent Helga back today. Agnes says that she's not afraid of him anymore, and Claudia says you carry the same blood. And yeah, there's the whole renouncing your blood means freeing yourself. You said that yourself. Blah,
And then
blah,
I found it interesting right at the end too that Claudia tells Agnes basically like stay with my mom because you guys are clearly having a good time together.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. It kind of shows that like clearly she knew what was going on, and I don't know if they thought they were hiding.
Claudia
it from her.
knows everything.
Yeah.
Now. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, and then it immediately jumps to a young Claudia going into the clock house to ask.
Another one of my favorite scenes in the series is when Claudia visits Aegon in the police station in 1953.
Yep.
Oh,
And
is that in this episode?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's in this episode.
Oh.
And,
She says the same thing that her daughter told him when I think he asked her if he was a good police officer. or
Those
something.
three scenes back to back are fantastic.
Yeah.
Old Claudia and
Yeah.
young Egon, then middle Claudia and old Egon, and then young Claudia and young Egon. All three back to
Yeah.
back, and it's one of the most beautiful like three scenes in a row I think of the entire series.
Yeah.
And
it's
Claudia, old Claudia at least, knows exactly what's going to happen to her father, and she starts breaking down into tears, saying like,
She's
"You don't
like
deserve any of
weeping.
this."
She's apologizing.
Which she's apologizing. Which I think Egon is one of the few good characters. He just,
He figures it out
very
too late.
unlucky.
He
Yeah.
didn't have all the information, and he made mistakes because he didn't understand the world around him. He even says that.
Until the very end.
Until the very,
So
very
brutal.
end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would have felt better if he died just still trying to figure it out. honestly.
Yeah. don't give him the answers, right?
Die weiße Teufel.
Egon goes back to his daughter. Says, "I had the craziest day at work today."
That's right.
I think he mentioned something about the
He
white
met
devil.
a witch or something.
Yeah. Oh, I met a witch today.
And she said that she was sorry, and the little girl says, "It doesn't sound like a witch."
But he
He
also
goes-
says she had two different colored eyes.
Mm-hmm.
She is two different colored eyes, but Jordan, you were referencing this earlier. Just as older Claudia told him that he's too good of a person, the world doesn't deserve him, young Claudia tells him he's too good of a person and the world does not deserve
Yeah.
him.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
he's,
They
like,
say-
freaked out.
She specifically says that to try and like give him that clue
Mm-hmm.
Right.
backwards in time, and it really still doesn't pay off until
Yeah.
Yeah.
what is that, episode 7?
Yeah, and then I think the next scene is, Alex, you were saying back to back scenes. Claudia is informed by Aegon, so middle-aged Claudia is told by older Aegon that he has cancer, and that's kind of like the first time you see Claudia give any love to her father as
Mhm.
well. So this episode, you see Claudia, as she starts realizing what's going on in reality, with all this time travel, she starts becoming more loving,
More compassionate.
more compassionate.
Oh, yeah.
But that's
But it's
that's
also
into
guilt.
theories later as well.
It's also
but just
guilt.
keep it in mind.
Well,
Keep
and
it-
she's like the ultimate counterpart for Adam, because Adam specifically says like you have to eliminate all emotions to be able to do this shit, and
Yeah.
she's like the opposite end of the spectrum, really like emotionally invested in all
Yeah.
of these people.
And then we jump to seeing old Claudia goes into Tannhouse's office, young Tannhouse's shop, and he says like the device is not ready that he gave her, and he said, and she says it won't be ready for 33 years. Don't worry, and basically prepares him for when young Claudia is gonna come in.
Well, that's a funny scene too. There's comedy there because she's like, she gives him the book and says that she's gonna die soon, and one day he'll understand, and then he'll have to explain to her how the machine works. And he's like, after you're dead, or like before you die. She's like, no, after that. And he's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
She's like, weren't you listening?
Yeah, she says things have to take their course as they always have.
Yeah. And then I think we're taken to middle-aged Claudia, seeing Regina. She travels back in time, travels forward in time to 2020, sees Regina with her late-stage cancer, and is emotionally breaking down in front of us. And again, to Alex's point, Claudia seems to be totally driven by her emotions when she's, deciding whether or not she wants to be invested in this time travel stuff.
It's all about saving her daughter.
Exactly.
Saving her family. Well, and then we see earlier, I think Agnes went to the church and says that she wants back into Sigmundus. Noah's like, what the hell are you doing here, Adam? Like, Adam's not going to let you back in. You chose to be with Claudia, and so you don't get to be part of our paradise. And she gives her she gives Noah the Claudia death news clipping and says, like, consider this a peace offering. Tell Adam that I want back in before the next cycle starts. And Noah's like, you're sacrificing her, which is another chess reference, which that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Sacrificing the queen.
And then we see Noah that night confronting old Claudia with his shotgun. And so this is the Claudia death scene, which there's some very interesting dialogue here where Noah says, you thought you could trust her, talking about Agnes, but she betrayed you. She didn't even bat an eyelid. You're going to die, and everything that you stand for will die with you. And Claudia says, I know I'm going to die, but am I going to lose this match, or is this here, our meeting, you and your gun, only a part of a game that you still don't understand how to play?
Right.
Well, because we also, when Agnes meets with Noah, she gave him the last couple pages of the book that Claudia had given her.
No. She tells him that Claudia will have the last pages on her. That's why he goes to kill her and then steals them from her.
Him. And then at that point, I think the episode ends with him looking at those pages.
And he looks very upset at what he reads.
Yeah.
He says, upset. Yeah, and he says the name Charlotte a couple times.
Yeah, he says, Charlotte, this isn't right, this isn't true, and he kind of like freaks out.
I did want to say what you were saying earlier. That dialogue in this scene is amazing.
Oh yeah, the back half of that is great. Noah says, you think you can manipulate me with your words? I'm no longer one of your pawns. She says, but you're still one of Adam's. The paradise he's promising you is nothing but a lie. He's selling you the illusion of freedom. Ask yourself if you are really free. If you were really free, would you have a choice? Do you have a choice now? When he's like holding the gun straight at her chest, and he like clearly has a moment of doubt and lowers the gun a little bit. And then he like
just absolutely
stiffens up and just
blows her away.
She flies back.
She flies back like 5 feet.
Holy shit! What kind of gauge?
Point blank, 12 gauge to the chest.
I just think it's great because if you consider that Claudia and Adam are essentially gods in whatever's happening here, Noah is essentially like talking to the enemy god, and he's about to kill her. But she already knows everything that's going to happen.
One might say the white devil.
the fact that she's willing to sacrifice herself and like knows that she's going to die there and is like at peace with it makes me think that she's playing chess on another level, and she just like has everything set up the way she wants it to be and knows what she's going to do and has complete faith that her plan will work out.
Well, and also in what she says to Noah, and what Noah sees in the pages, changes his mind on things, because the last scene of the episode is Adam asking if like she had the pages on her or something, and he says no, and then says she got what she deserved. In the end, we all get what we deserve, which is kind of ominous and foreshadowing to either Noah trying to kill Adam.
That's why it's the greatest end to this episode, I think, because we get a lot of information about what both sides believe in.
Ooh, can I give you that Adam quote that he says to Noah there at the end? He goes, no matter how much we want to fight it, we are connected by our blood. We can be alienated from our families and not understand their actions. Still, in the end, we would do anything for them. A red thread that connects all of our lives with each other's. And then he asks Noah, did she have the pages on her? And Noah shakes his head no. And Adam says, she got what she deserved. In the end, we all get what we deserve, which that's a theme that comes back several times in this season and a little bit in the last season as well, of the idea of getting what you deserve.
Justice.
Yes.
So, let's move on to episode 4.
Jordan had to head out, so if you guys are missing that voice, just know that he had to go have dinner with his dad and his girlfriend. He's got a cool life, unlike all of us. Okay, so we start season 2, episode 4, with Jonas, young Jonas, which we did not have any of in the last episode. We had no idea where he went after the entry of the wormhole at the end of episode 2, but he wakes up seemingly in 1921.
Very similar to how he wakes in a lot of the other episodes.
Yes, jolts awake. And he
Bad sleeper.
yeah, for real.
It's an Ambien.
And he has the noose burn and the gunshot wound in his leg from Elizabeth.
Yep, he buries the hazmat suit, and he meets 2 like farmer guys in this big wheat field, and they take him to Erna, who like runs the, I don't know,
The local inn.
yeah, essentially.
It says Erna loves stray dogs, and
Yeah,
it's
she takes
right
in
after
strays.
World War One. So we find out that there's a lot of soldiers kind of,
Vagabonding.
yeah.
essentially.
And we also see that a little girl who works in the shop's name is Agnes. A coincidence? I think not.
Yeah. Okay, so after that cold open of seeing Jonas in 1921, we cut to June 24th, 2020, 3 days before the apocalypse.
And we see Marta and dreaming about when Jonas and them were together, saying, "We are perfect for each other. Never believe anything else."
We're a perfect match. And then, but this time, the person who jolts awake from this dream is not Jonas, it's Marta. So that's
A little foreshadowing right there to
Yes.
season 3, I think. Yeah.
absolutely.
And so I think Jonas is chilling with Hannah at the house, and Charlotte comes barging in and recognizes him as the stranger. At which point,
I think Hannah actually calls her to come over and
Yeah.
says like, "Hey, this is Jonas. We have to
Yeah.
tell people about it."
Okay. They introduce Jonas to Charlotte, and then I think Charlotte almost immediately is like, after Jonas explains what's going on, is like, "We have to go tell Katerina," and they bring her over, tell her what's going on, and like a rational person, she's like, "No, you're all insane. Stop messing with me. Like I need to find out where my husband and son are." But she ends up going back to the high school and looking for evidence, and sees a photo, and her son is in it. It's
Back in
back,
'86.
yeah, it's a photo,
Ooh,
a
that's
class photo
devastating.
in 1986.
Oh my god.
Something we also didn't say that happened that I just found really interesting was when the stranger Jonas was at their house. He sees the gun that Hannah has from Alexander, and he kind of has a adverse reaction to it, clearly kind of foreshadowing that he knows that.
That gun is the
Yeah,
gun
like,
that
where
kills-
Where did you get this?
Yeah,
right?
that's the gun
Yeah.
that kills Marta.
that stranger middle-aged Jonas several times also like pauses for a minute and looks at the ground on the spot where Marta will be shot later.
Oh,
Several
wow.
times he like stares directly at that spot, and the first couple times I saw it, I was like, why is he just like staring at the ground? Like, why
Wow.
did they zoom in on the ground there? And then I realized like, oh shit, that's where Marta dies, like at the end
No
of the
way,
season.
wow.
I didn't
That's
catch
nice.
that. Wow.
Yeah.
That's such a small detail. Great find. Great find.
Yeah, and then Alexander gets interviewed by Clausen. He seems to have like good reasons for delaying the investigation, that it's like a security thing with the power plant.
He's real caught up on Alexander taking the Tiedemann last name.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he explains it away as the name being like they built the town and it's like an important
think
name to
is
the region.
a
Which
fair-
again, he
valid
seems
But
to have.
Clausen is a good detective.
Right.
and
Yeah,
knows
he's not
there's
buying
something
into
up-
that bullshit.
yeah, not
But
at
he
all.
does get his original name of Kohler out of him, during the
Yes.
interrogation, and I think that's a tipping point for Clausen.
Was that in this episode?
Yes.
Did
Yeah.
he get to- okay.
Yeah, because then Clausen, the next person that
Oh,
Clausen
yeah.
goes to interview is Hannah,
Oh,
his
yeah.
masseuse, and the lady that he's paying blackmail money to, essentially. And when he gets there, Katerina is there, and because Clausen had asked Voller about Hannah, and he basically said like, yeah, her husband hanged himself a while back, a year ago, I guess, and no one really knows why she's married him. Like, she's really pretty. She could have had anybody. There's like gossip that she was having an affair with Katerina, the principal's wife, Ulrich. And then when they go into interview her, Katerina's there, and Clausen's like, "Wow, you're pretty much the last person I would expect to be here. What are you guys doing here?"
Yeah, seriously.
I also find it really interesting how Wöhler kind of talks about Hannah in a admirable way, like he was kind of interested in her in some type of way,
Right? That she's
like saying that like she
pretty
could have
and-
gotten with anyone she
Yeah.
wanted or whatever. I found that kind of interesting because we haven't really seen Wöhler talk about any of the characters
No,
really.
he's been
Besides
like
it.
a sidekick the whole time.
Well, and Wöhler also asks him asks Clausen in
Oh,
that
yeah.
scene how he got on the task force, if he like requested to be here or something, and Clausen's like, "Yeah, I did request to be here."
Yeah.
Yep.
Like
Very,
good,
like-
good job, detective.
Well, and then we see Charlotte's bunker that has all the information and everything that she's been collecting and figuring out. And
Right,
basically-
and that's when they bring Katerina there after Clausen leaves,
Mhm.
because he asks them about the stranger, and they both say that they don't recognize him after having met him.
And 1987, Claudia actually jumped to 2020 at this point, so she's like navigating her way around 2020.
She figures out computers really fast, honestly.
Oh wow, what a scene!
Yeah.
What a scene. Looking for the keyboard.
Yeah.
And then I think the biggest reveal of this episode is when Jonas is taken by Noah to the church, to the little underground lair,
Oh, dude.
where he meets his future self or supposed future self in Adam. And you guys were saying that we met Adam in episode 1. I don't remember that, but I definitely remember
I think
this.
we see him, but like
we don't know who he is.
we don't know who he is.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just know. Yeah.
Yeah,
that
we're
he's,
introduced that Adam is supposedly the older version of Jonas. We also find, this is not in 1921, this is in 2020, that Magnus, Francesca, Marta, and Elizabeth all, that was a weird order to say them in, but all go into the cave and they find Bartosz and they kind of
They rough him.
yeah, they
Magnus
tie
beats
him
the
up in
shit
the
out of
cave for like 2 days.
Dude, brutal.
Magnus
Like,
Magnus
Do
straight up
they
threatens
time
to kill
travel?
him.
Do they time travel in that?
Yeah.
episode?
At that point,
They get the
no.
time travel
yeah.
device from Bartosz and they
Yeah,
finally get some
yeah.
And they
information
leave
out of
him
it.
there overnight because he
Yeah.
won't tell them what the
Yeah.
deal is.
Yeah. But then he eventually takes them.
Yeah, they come back the next day and they're like, "Yeah, we'll leave you here again. We'll leave you here for
He's
another
like,
night if you
"Alright."
don't tell us." And he's
Dude,
like,
imagine being so scared that you'd rather spend a night in a cave than tell
Your friends about time
who
travel.
Noah is. Yeah.
"Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, and then I think the last thing that happens in this episode is young Noah is standing next to older Noah, asking him, "Hey, do you know what's about to happen?" And young Noah says something along the lines of like, "I wish I could tell you, but if I told you, you would never end up where I am now, and you would
Yeah.
have never experienced the things I have experienced."
yeah." If I told you what I've learned
Yeah.
recently, you wouldn't do all the things that you
Yeah.
have to do to get to the point that I'm at now. So I
Yeah,
can't tell
so
you
I
this
can't
thing.
tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He says that he's reached some realization about Adam, and because he tries to kill Adam,
Right.
Because
and
he gets the last
re-
pages. Of the
because
book.
he gets the last pages, and there's some realization, but he doesn't tell the younger Noah because if he tells the younger Noah, it would affect all the decisions he's made up to that point.
Right.
And he
Maybe-
wants to keep everything the same.
maybe-
So it's like he knows what's going on, but he still doesn't want to stop it from happening, which is an interesting dichotomy because it's not like because if he wanted to stop everything from happening, he could tell his younger self not to do certain things. I mean, or try to at least.
And maybe he was when he said, Jonas gets what he deserves. He was thinking to himself, "Oh, I'm gonna do this.
Exactly.
I'm going to kill Adam / Jonas and set the record straight." And he hasn't yet done that, but he's so.
But he's
confident in
setting
himself.
the things in motion, and he
Right.
thinks that he's actually running stuff.
Right.
Pretty
But
much
then
almost
but
works
then
out, right?
Adam says the
And
thing.
it pretty much his plan, Noah's plan, pretty much almost works out until the detail of the functioning of the gun.
Right.
Well,
So,
and
like-
the first time I watched that, I thought maybe he just didn't know how to use a gun. But the other thing is that because Adam's not supposed to die at
Right,
that time,
right,
Yeah.
so
right. I
Noah
think
was
that's what it
trying.
is.
Noah was trying to break the cycle because he finally
Right.
realized everything.
Yeah.
But fate and time or whatever.
But it would
It's
make
been-
sense
it couldn't do
why
it.
Noah
Wouldn't
would
let
not
it
want
happen.
to change any part of the past if he thinks that he is the one to end the future. That's
Exactly.
why he wouldn't.
That's
Yeah.
that's kind of parallelism to bootstrap paradoxes with ideas through time,
Yeah.
right? The idea wouldn't exist without it being passed back to a younger self or another younger person.
Exactly.
This is one of those things where it cannot be passed back.
Right. It's almost the inverse.
Yeah.
It's like the keeping of a secret through time in order
yeah.
to maintain a loop.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
That scene also has the picture that Elizabeth was looking at in Tannhouse's office, the three worlds picture and the winds blowing from either side, which we can discuss in the theories section. But
one of the other things that we see in this episode was the Cilia girl from 2053 and Elizabeth have a conversation, and Elizabeth apparently knows what she was keeping everyone from the God particle, and she says that it's not actually part of God but actually part of the devil, which is kind of interesting. So she
I'm
clearly
interested to see how that plays in at a later date.
she clearly knows something.
yeah,
to
well, I
what
think
is going on.
she has a fundamental misunderstanding of what the thing is, because I think she hears it being referred to as the God particle, and so she assumes it's like they think of it as like a piece of God, but really it's like a gateway to hell, and so like that's why she's trying to keep anybody from going through
One
it.
thing I'd be remiss if I didn't mention was that we were so close this episode to finding out what happened to Volar's eye.
That's right.
He was just about to explain it to Clausen, but then I believe somebody Claudia walks in front of the car and he has to swerve off. Yeah.
Oh man, so
See
good.
if that's ever revealed. All right, next episode 5.
Mm-hmm.
One last thing.
Okay.
Young Jonas is back in 1921. He wakes up, and I think we talked about it earlier, but he also tries to go back through the tunnel, which he finds is not there.
It's not finished yet. It's
not built yet.
or not functional yet, I guess. Either way.
Well, and young Noah says that it won't be finished for 32 years.
And
or something.
young Noah is sitting outside of the cave eating an apple, very similarly.
to older.
So that's
Noah,
fun. And then the classic Adam Ich bin du at the end.
Yep.
Every stone is once again where it belongs. Everyone is in the place they were destined to be. Now all that's needed is a little push, which that little push will come back later.
In the next episode?
No, in the last episode.
More of a pull of a trigger.
Right.
Yeah.
Could argue he pushed the bullet into her, but that would be a bad argument, though. Okay. I guess let's move on to episode 5, Lost and Found. Opens with a sex scene, the Marta and Jonas sex scene, but this time instead of young Jonas, it's middle-aged Jonas. And
Marta turns into the God particle.
yeah, it like comes out of her belly button womb area, which is very interesting. And then the stranger wakes up.
So it comes out of the same location where she was shot.
Yes, that's interesting too.
I didn't put that together.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so then Jonas, that's stranger Jonas jolts awake, and then we also see young Jonas wake up in bed in 1921, but he wakes up peacefully, which is kind of interesting.
Is it any coincidence that he knows he can't time travel and he sleeps well?
Interesting. That is kind of interesting.
I think not, Colby. I think that's a great observation.
Yeah. The one time period that he's in that he can't be traveling and doesn't have to worry about all that stuff is the one time he wakes up peacefully.
Yeah.
Sleeps, for 2 days or whatever?
Yeah, that's what they said.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And then, okay, so he wakes up and Adam is sitting there and he says, "Is it not peculiar that one feels the greatest aversion towards the very people who are most similar to oneself?" And Jonas says, "I want to go back home." And Adam says, "Get
I
dressed.
just want to go home."
I just want this sick shit to stop.
Which, Adam knows exactly what Jonas was wearing. That yellow hoodie.
Oh, yeah.
And
the white shoes.
Also, think about who else would know he had the yellow hoodie. That probably plays into a theory we'll talk about more later.
True. Okay, so then we see the title, June 25th, 2020, 2 days to the apocalypse.
And then the next big thing that happens is
Hannah steals the time machine.
Yeah, Hannah steals the time machine from old Jonas, and then in 1987 we see Ulrich kind of planning to escape to go get Mikkel because he found out about Mikkel being in this time period from Egon, who was trying to figure out.
Slid a picture over to him.
Also, when Egon went and got that picture, he went and talked to Enos, and that's when we find out that Enos has been drugging Mikkel with sleeping pills, which is why old Michael is so kind of like fucked up and traumatized, is because he was being drugged as a child.
I think it has to do with the social care as well. Like, if the social worker knew that this kid was saying insane things, they'd be like, oh, he needs to go to a mental hospital. And she's just like, no, come on, like, I'm going to literally give you sleeping meds so you can't even talk about what you
Does
think
Mikkel
is
say
real.
anything? Do we know that he's told her anything?
Yeah.
Well, he says he's from the future.
Yeah.
He confides in her that he's like, hey,
Okay.
look, I'm from the future. And she's like, oh, honey, like...
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Because
She
really
sees
only
the
one to
Captain
talk
Future
to.
comic book sitting next to him, and so she
Yeah.
kind of assumes that
Right.
it's like a coping mechanism that he's
Right.
saying he's from the future to deal with whatever trauma he's experienced, and she doesn't really know what that trauma is.
But she is the only one that he talks to, right? Like, he won't speak with any of the other...
He seems to
Yeah.
not speak to anybody.
He doesn't
else.
really speak to anybody.
Yeah.
He's really secluding himself because he's so confused, I feel like.
Which is fun because there are parallels. One to Helga not speaking to anybody except for one person.
Oh, Claudia, right.
When he does his traveling, he only speaks to Noah. And then there's also the parallel of somebody being drugged to the point that they won't tell anybody anything and don't speak, which is paralleled by.
I think you're right. It's not necessarily only speaks to them, but it reveals their character identity. Like you know I'm from the future or the past, and I don't tell other people. I always refer that. I like talk to one person about it, which may have some significance, and I'd be interested to see if we figure out if that's not the case in an interaction situation. But
That's another reason I kind of think that Enos might be part of Sigmundus.
Why would that be, like, why would it be impactful that you would only tell one person? What kind of, like, symbolic, how would that be symbolic?
You're waiting for the right person to tell it to. Somebody who fits into the
there's-
scheme.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a consistent theme throughout the show of people keeping secrets and not revealing information to other people, and that causing issues.
Francisca's
all about that, which
about
she's
that,
kind of hypocritical, but
A
The
very
lies.
good example of that in this episode was when Ulrich went to his parents and asked his mom what his father was doing the night Mads disappeared, and she knows that
he wasn't
there, but she lies and says he was to avoid suspicion.
Right.
And that's like, things could have gone so differently had she just told the truth there.
Yeah, and I think the theme of the truth is kind of, not to be cliche, but what will set you free is the truth. Jonas, middle-aged Jonas, is all about that when he comes back to his original 2019-2020 timeline as middle-aged Jonas. He's like, look, I've spent my entire past as like making sure nobody knows the truth but a select few people, just lying to everybody, and it's all of this has occurred because of that. I'm just going to tell everybody the truth about everything. Like he tells
and of
people
course when he does that, he tells Hannah, and she steals his time machine and fucking bails.
Unbelievable.
as I would do the
Because
same.
Hannah sucks.
Hannah's the worst.
Hannah is
Which makes me think she's gonna have an awesome redemptive arc.
And Regina also has the article that she found from 2020, and she's back in 1987, about her father's death that's going to happen in 2 days.
Yep. And so then she reschedules the French delegation meeting again to go see her father, because I'm telling you, dude, the French dudes who get hanged in 2053 are the French delegation. I'm so confident. They're the only French people in the entire
33
show.
years
Yeah, sure, why not? They travel through time. They know about the God particle. Dude.
And then Adam has the whole conversation with Jonas about the 3 lives. If you want to say the actual quote, you can.
Yeah, I have that. Well, first we see him looking at the big painting, the Fall of the Damned painting, which is
Sigmundus bunker.
Yes, and that painting, actually, the story of that painting is the Archangel Michael casting souls into hell. So I find it interesting, if you subscribe to the Michael Adam theory, that Archangel Michael would be the person casting souls into hell. One of my pieces of evidence towards that theory. But Adam is talking to Noah and says that a man lives 3 lives. The first ends with the loss of naivete, the second with the loss of innocence, and the third with the loss of life itself. It is inevitable that we go through all 3 stages. You will turn into your older self, and your older self into what you see before you. And Jonas says, I don't have time for this shit. I have to go back home to my time. I've seen their graves. I know what happens. And he says, you still have lots of time. Adam says, there's still 99 years until that happens. Then we cut to Ulrich escaping from the mental
asylum.
institution to go find Mikkel because he knows that they're in the same time now.
And then in 2020, we also see Stranger Jonas going to Marta's room somehow and leaving the St. Christopher medal on her
Seemingly breaks
pillow.
into the Nielsen house. Although maybe they left the door open because their kid was missing. It didn't have their key, which would be a tie back to Yana and Mads.
Yeah, I think Stranger Jonas, he knows exactly where everyone is at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows that Marta is in, or is in the process of time traveling, I think, with Bartosz, his time machine.
Yeah, because they go back to 86. Well, yeah, because that happens in this episode because Ulrich goes and has his scene with Mikkel where he does the upside down cup thing, and the question isn't how, but when. Oh, dude, the hug that they have,
satisfying,
so good. I rewatched that episode on Father's Day, and it was nice.
What better time? Hug your dad every once in a while.
Oh yeah. But then when they run to the.
They run to the caves.
They run to the caves
by Aegon
again. Classic.
Because
Ulrich
Enos,
getting stopped in the caves.
Is it Enos? Yeah, Enos comes back and sees the 2 glasses on the table.
Yeah. Well, she hears that some guy escaped from the mental institution who killed kids back in the 50s, and she's like, "Oh shit, that's obviously Ulrich." And so she goes home and calls Egon and says, "Hey, I don't know where my kid is."
Yeah. Yeah, and then the craziest thing that I don't know. This is one of my favorite scenes is when Ulrich is in the cop car,
baby,
and he sees Marta, Magnus, Bartosz, and Elizabeth.
But it just makes him sound even more crazy because
your kids are not there.
Yeah, there's random people on the side of the road. Those aren't your kids.
Adding insult to injury. Imagine him seeing your children as you're getting thrown back in. Oh my God.
Yeah. Absolutely devastating.
I think the thing that cuts is I think I don't know how else I would react. You know, I'd be like, look, wait, those are my kids. Yeah. Hold on.
I think any sane person would react like that.
And there's nothing he can do about it.
Which is ironic because he's a mental patient.
Yeah.
Yep. Brutal.
And then later on we see in 1987 Charlotte confront Bernd, who was the previous CEO of the power plant, about how the data that he gave her doesn't make any sense, and he kind of tells her what actually happened.
That is an interesting scene because I never understood how he knew. I know he's the head of the nuclear power plant, but he knew that it wasn't quite accurate. It wasn't quite reflective of the calculations of the God particle. It was slightly off, but like
it was like very similar to. It was in line enough
so
with
why
for them.
Didn't he want to like reveal that to the world?
So because the only reason they discovered it was through a nuclear accident, and they had a bunch of waste and had
reported.
to. And so the whole thing was. When you're first introduced to the power plant in the first episode, like the guy on the radio specifically says like, "Oh, this is like one of the longest running power plant with no accidents." And so his whole thing is like, his whole thing is that I don't want my name or the name of this power plant associated with that accident. You can use the data to like do your own.
Well, he says all that in a later episode, but it's the same. Situation.
Yeah, well, he says she can use the data however she wants, but to keep his name out of it because he wants to maintain the legacy of Atomkraftwerk.
And then I think the last part of this episode is Adam leading, or should we say misleading, Jonas to the God particle to try to get him to travel through time.
So my question with that issue, and like, I understand that Adam was deceiving Jonas into thinking that this could stop the whole cycle or whatever, but how did Jonas actually think that this would? And I guess because he's still naive and doesn't actually know how all the time travel works, but why did he think that doing this would stop
I think that's
everything?
a big part is the naivety, but Adam also tells him, hey, like, you want to save your dad? Like, you just have to go in here and,
He's
like, you can save
manipulating him.
Yeah, so Jonas, poor, like, 18-year-old or 17,
16, I think,
16.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe 17.
Reacts pretty normal.
Yeah, like, oh, I
Yeah.
want to see my dad.
Well,
also-
I would agree, but I just thinking about it a little bit, I was like, how would stopping your dad from killing yourself?
I also-
like,
I had the same exact question after.
I also think
multiple
that
times of watching
Jonas, I think that Jonas at that point doesn't fundamentally understand how the
Exactly.
time travel works, because even in the scene where middle-aged Jonas is stopping him from just taking Mikkel back from, like, stealing him from the hospital at that point, he doesn't say, like, you can't because you already exist. He says you can't because then you won't exist. He's saying it as if, like, you could take him back, but then you wouldn't exist.
Yeah,
The true thing is you can't take him back at all because you exist. Like, you physically couldn't do it.
Oh, that makes sense.
And so he, like, fundamentally doesn't understand that, like, no, your dad died. You can't stop him from dying anymore. He has died.
And so he sends him through, and you see older Magnus, and I believe older Francisca or older...
Yeah, you get confirmed
Magnus.
that it is Magnus
Yeah.
Because she says...
because
Is it
she calls him Magnus, but we don't.
We know the lady, does it... I know it's either Francisca or Agnes. It's one
It's
of the
definitely
two.
Francisca.
Yeah, Francisca. So both of them say something like, why did you lie to him?
Yeah, like, you could have
What do you-
told him what his part in all of this was. You didn't have to, like,
Yeah.
lie. You didn't have to keep it a secret or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. And then I think that's the end of the episode.
Yeah, because he says if you succeed, we will reorder the world to Adam as he sent to Noah. To
He
Jonas
tells
as he
him, hey,
sends
you
to.
won't be born, but everybody else will live, including Martha.
He also tells him that this is a special time travel device, so it breaks the 33-year cycle. You can just go wherever you
Right,
want.
so
because
he
you've
can choose
stabilized
to
it
go
so
to
much.
the night that his dad died
Yeah.
rather than going to 33 years or whatever, a multiple of
66
33.
years.
Because he goes
Oh, it's
he
like
goes
100
specifically
and-
98 years
Yeah,
into the
whatever,
future
yeah.
instead of 99. But
Episode 6?
yeah, I think that's everything from episode 5.
The endless cycle.
Episode 6, The Endless
Ooh.
Cycle.
This episode was maybe one of the best
Episode
episodes.
6, The Endless Cycle.
Just keep saying that for the next 20 minutes.
Oh my god.
So the first thing we see is actually Adam's wall of family portraits,
Mm-hmm.
and he's asking, where did everything begin? Where is the beginning? Is it in the past or is it in the future? Who can say?
Or is it just one big endless loop?
Yeah, will we ever be capable of knowing the origin of all things, or is there still an origin before that and before that and before that? So beginning and end, do beginning and end even exist, or is it all connected in an endless loop? And are beginning and end just different words for one and the same moment? And then
I would argue maybe an
oh, and yeah,
endless
while
cycle
that's
instead.
happening, like a lot of like the big
Plot.
important
Devices, yeah.
scenes of
Yeah.
the last,
It's basically like a mini
Are-
summary.
and they're going in reverse though, which is
Right.
really interesting. They're all going like saying, "Oh, if we could just track everything back,
It
could we
ends-
find
it ends
the true?"
with Mikkel hanging himself.
With Michael hanging himself, and then
Yeah.
Jonas screaming Mikkel in the woods,
Right.
like when he lost him. So that's kind of interesting. And then
And then
Oh,
Jonas,
yeah, 'cause
Jonas
this is-
wakes up and he goes downstairs and makes breakfast, and it kind of is very reminiscent of the first episode.
yeah,
When-
but everything's better because
yeah.
it's 2019
Yep.
instead of 2020.
He seems
and then his
happy.
dad scares him, and you realize, oh, we're back to this time, because you didn't really know where he was going
Yeah.
to. Kind
Yeah,
of.
because then you see June 20th, 2019, the day before Michael kills himself.
And they go over to the party.
Well,
right?
they talk about
They bring
the
up the
Ulrich
party
and
and
Katarina party.
Yeah,
Hmm.
they bring up that it's their anniversary party tonight, and Michael like gets a 1,000-yard stare, like traumatized stare, and is like, I'm not gonna go.
Well,
Like,
he sees Jonas holding the yellow jacket,
and that freaks him out even more. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
because he tells him it's gonna rain
it's gonna
later, and so
rain.
Jonas grabs the
Yep.
yellow jacket, and then he's like, "Fuck the yellow jacket!" And he
Yeah.
like drops his bowl of cereal and freaks out a little bit.
Yeah. Which is odd because as his father, you would think he knew he had a yellow jacket. But
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, he was drugged.
Brand
He was
new
drugged
with
as a
his
kid.
mom.
And so then do we jump forward to the party scene, or
No,
No,
do
it's
they
kind
go
of
to the
pre-party
beach?
activities.
First we have Alexander is looking at a newspaper and he sees a thing about a murder in Marburg that happened 33 years ago, and that there are still 2 fugitives still on the run, and he's like clearly kind of shaken by that news.
Well, and then Peter comes home to Charlotte, and this is the time when she had like just found out that he was cheating on her with Benny. And he says that he was visiting Helga, but she doesn't believe him. And then he kind of gets mad at her and says that she's dead inside and it's her fault that he cheated and stuff like that.
Oh my gosh, there's so much in between that scene and when they go to the party.
Yeah, the party is
Yeah.
way later.
Oh, so this is the also before the party, pre-party.
Yeah, because they all go to the lake.
Or Michael sees himself.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And that's when Michael needs to go to the bathroom.
Take a little piss.
And,
Yeah.
And they both get kind of scared of each other when they see
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
as a
Also, just as, this is kind of a sidetrack, but if you have a kid that has rubella, are you going to be parading him around town?
yeah, probably
Like
not.
driving him around and then have him walk around the party and stuff like that?
My question that I think is really interesting is why would he even get rubella? Is he not vaccinated? Like, it's 2019.
Yeah.
She's the principal of a school. You would think that
Are
she'd
they
believe in
anti-vaxxers?
vaccination. So it's kind of interesting that he actually would even get that disease in the first place. But
Maybe
that's
in
kind of neither here
alternate
nor there.
reality where there's no vaccines.
Also, fun fact, the pajamas that Mikkel is wearing in those scenes have red, yellow, and blue spaceships on them.
I like the sound of that.
Trio.
And then we see all the kids.
At the lake.
Marta,
Yeah.
Magnus.
Such a great scene, man.
They find the pendant in the sand,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
which
Finds
is a big,
Jonas
which is a big
finds
if
the pendant,
for season 3.
gives it to Martha, and then says, "Hey, I have to go." Right before, like, because Martha in her head, she's
They're about
like,
to kiss in
yeah.
her head.
Oh,
She's-
she says a whole thing about, like, do you ever wish that you
Yeah.
knew it was going to happen, like, just in the next,
Yeah.
like, and he's like, what, you mean, like, in the future? And she's like, or just in the next 5 minutes. Like, very clearly, like, yo, kiss me, bro. And he just is not picking up on it.
not picking up on it at all because he hasn't fallen in love with her yet.
No.
Yeah.
That's a fun thing, is that neither of them have their first kiss with each other at the same
Yeah.
time. Their relationship starts at different points depending on whose perspective you're
Yeah.
looking at it from.
Yeah. And then do we immediately go from him saying I have to go to future Jonas zipping up his jacket to cover his neck scars and coming back?
Yeah, because he's watching them from the woods.
And that's when he like makes out with her.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh baby, I miss you so much." She's like, "Oh yeah, you
We
just
are
walked
perfect.
away."
Well,
The
he
perfect
says the
match.
whole
Yeah.
says the whole perfect
Yeah.
match. Don't let anyone ever tell you any different or something.
yeah, never think anything else.
And then we cut to Magnus creeping on Francesca, which is a consistent theme. He's always kind of like watching her from behind a tree or something, which I don't know if that'll come up
Now-
again in season 3.
Yeah.
But it's been something that I've consistently noticed how he creeps on her.
He is constantly watching her from the woods, which is really a theme of a lot of people. I mean, Noah's often in the woods. Jonas is often in the woods. I'm sure there's other people who are in the woods that we don't know about yet. But yeah, that's an interesting scene too, because Bartosz has the whole ghost story about the woman who drowns in the lake back in the day when they were trying to like mess with Marta, and then Magnus is peeing in the woods and he sees Francisca floating like in the water, looking like a dead body essentially, and he runs in to try and save her, and then it turns out she's just
She's buck ass naked.
nude chilling, and they both kind of check each other out and they like what they see.
Yeah.
And then we see
Horny teenagers.
and then we see Bartosz really poorly try to flirt with Marta. And
Straight up the worst timing, like right after she had the greatest kiss, like life-changing kiss of her life with Jonas. He's like,
Oh, I can't make it
hey,
to
I
your
like
party.
your hair.
Yeah.
And then he's like, I can't make it to your party, and she's like, cool, I
Yeah.
guess. I don't care.
Also interesting that Bartosz son of Regina, is the one who says that I like your hair when
Oh.
Regina had the whole compliment about I like your hair that way. Interesting.
And then the party starts. That's a plus.
Party
Yes.
starts.
Oh,
They
Cat-
immediately go upstairs to bang.
Katarina is on another level during the party.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
she's
all
lit.
about this party.
It's really interesting seeing the relationships of the people like Hannah and Charlotte and even Katarina with them before all of the shit show that happened in December.
This party's also where we believe Hannah and Ulrich
Like, start hooking up. Well,
Like,
because they have
Oh.
they go outside and they're smoking and stuff, and they have the exact same conversation they had when they sat on the bus stop together.
The whole
in
apocalypse, but
1986.
it's reversed. They're
Yeah.
saying the lines that the other person said to
Shut
them.
the
No.
front
Yeah.
door.
It's the exact
it's-
same conversation.
Yeah, it's the
Word
same.
for
It's the same
word?
conversation, word for word, but
They're-
they switched who was saying what
No.
lines.
Dude,
yeah.
so that's
I did
so
not catch
just
that.
before we get to spoilers, that's alternate universe.
oh, probably.
potentially, yeah.
Yeah, alternate universe because Jonas
That's-
and
Well,
Martha
they're sitting
switched
on a
roles.
red swing
yeah.
set when they say it in the 2019, and they're sitting in a yellow bus stop or
No
yellow or blue or
way.
something.
Yeah.
Bus stop.
Dude, that's probably the most concrete piece of evidence I've heard yet.
Well, I mean,
for
it,
at
well,
least the color scheme.
but it's also implied that they knew that they had the other conversation because it's the exact same conversation because
Right.
it's a storm and then they talk about.
yeah.
But I mean,
I
it
don't
is
know,
evidence
it seemed
for.
natural. The conversation seemed
It's-
natural, as if they don't remember that conversation.
They're like giggling when they're saying it because I think they recognize like, oh, we have said this. But when he says the word glaring, when he says "Grelle" or whatever, she like giggles because she's like, oh yeah, that's the thing that I said. But yeah, the interesting thing about the swing with
yeah.
the
Is the
swing with the
colors.
colors that you were saying, Hannah is wearing red and is sitting on a blue swing,
And the entire
Ulrich
backyard
is
is
wearing
red.
blue and sitting on a red swing, which is interesting. And the like yellow, there are yellow beams, the blue cross beam above and the red A-frame. So it's like all the red,
Wow.
yellow, blue symbolism right in that scene. Really, the whole party scene in general, like there's red lights in one room and blue green lights in another room, and like
And when it
Katarina's
starts,
wearing red, Magnus is wearing blue. There's all kinds of
when it starts raining and they kiss behind a shed, it's a red shed too. so.
yeah.
And then I think the last thing that happens in this episode is Jonas going home to find Mikkel and tell him, or Michael, and tell him, hey, I know you're Mikkel. I'm here to like stop you from committing suicide.
Yeah, man. Well, he says the whole I know everything. He says the ultimate fist bump,
Yeah.
and his dad is just like
Yeah.
Michael's brain implodes.
Like, I'm
He's
so
like, how
sorry,
do you?
man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Well-
then he's like, but I'm not thinking about killing myself. I'm not thinking of doing it.
Yeah.
Well, Michael also says that Jonas was the one who led him through the cave.
No, that's where we find that out. That's right.
right.
and
Yep.
that's who led him to 1986. So that kind of implies why Mikkel never went back because he didn't actually know how to get through the cave.
Right.
which-
He didn't know how he got to that door in the first
because
place.
Jonas led him the entire way.
Well, and it's also the reason that Jonas can't stop him from killing himself because then he wouldn't be there to go.
Claudia comes in and explains that stuff.
Yeah.
She's like,
Before any of that, Michael also says, which I thought was a very interesting quote, that the whole like issue is a tiny section of a huge tumor that is bigger than anyone can imagine. And then he also says God doesn't err; He has a plan for all of us, which I think is interesting because obviously,
which is
in this-
exactly what Noah said to him
Yeah.
outside the cave.
Yeah, so it kind of implies maybe that he has some type of connection with Noah or something like that.
because he's Adam.
And then Claudia enters.
Yeah. Oh, dude, when Claudia walks in, I remember the first time I was watching it because I was like devastated by this father-son
Yeah.
scene, and then Claudia walks in, I was like, Claudia is everywhere all the
Yeah.
time. What the fuck?
literally, how does she know to show up there?
Yeah. That
Right.
notebook with everything in it.
That somebody wrote.
That whoever wrote it.
Well, and she says that Adam is darkness and she is the light, which is a flip of what has been said before. He doesn't want to fix things. He wants to destroy it. Jonas has to fight Adam. Claudia has seen the world without Jonas, and it is not better. She says
It's not what you're expecting.
he can save all his friends, including Marta.
Yeah, so this is another time that somebody has manipulated Jonas into doing what they want by telling him that he can save Martha. So
That he's driven by his desires. People know how he'll act because they know his
Exactly.
desires.
we aren't free in what we do because we aren't free in what we want.
Once I think Claudia and Adam are puppeteers. Once they understand what people's desires are, they just twinkle that in front of them to get them to do what they
when
want.
you see that from Claudia in all the situations we see when she was 13 or whatever in 1953 and 4, how she kind of puppets everyone around her because like she already knows she's smarter than him. And then even in the finale of season 2, Egon kind of says, I can't remember exactly what he says, but he says, "You've always been about yourself."
Oh it's always been about you.
You're
you have no
cold-hearted.
heart.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
she's trying to get him to move in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But
Well, right when he finds out that she knew about all the time travel and was kind of deceiving him, which I agree is kind of annoying.
Oh, I love. See, my whole thing is Egon originally is presented as like a bumbling idiot cop,
Yeah.
and the further you watch, the more you realize like.
He devolved
One,
into
there's
it.
so few clues, so spread out,
Yeah.
and people are actively keeping secrets from him. And like once he starts to get puzzle pieces, he figures it out real quick, even though he's old.
He's a great detective.
He figures it out.
Yeah. In the first chemo session, when Claudia goes with him, he essentially is like, I believe in time travel. Like that exists.
You know that
should
movie.
exist.
You know that movie with the guy in the DeLorean. I think that's the thing that's
Yeah.
real. I was like, oh shit.
That was his
That was
point of
funny.
reference.
Back to the Future.
He asks
it was
her,
86.
He asks her as well. I think he's, am I a good police officer?
And she says, I don't know.
Yeah, she says.
He says, I don't think I am.
Yeah.
I think I made a really stupid mistake.
Not paying
Turns,
attention.
but turns out
At
he's
all.
like the best detective in the show. Better, not better than Charlotte, but it turns out that the head of police, the police detectives that are investigating things, turn out to be the most adept investigators in the entire show. Charlotte and Tiedemann together.
The thing you find also, but both of them, or even three of them, if you think about Ulrich,
Clausen.
even Clausen,
Yeah.
all three of them kind of fail because of their fatal flaws. Like Charlotte would have known about everything earlier if she had listened to Peter. Ulrich wouldn't have gotten trapped if he had been a little less rash. Egon would have known about the stuff because he started out as a really good cop and then he kind of turned into a drunk and stuff like that. And then Clausen is also so full of his ego that he causes.
Yeah. Right, he's
Like,
also
I mean,
chasing
it's interesting
after his
because all of
brother.
them are
Brother's killer.
objectively pretty good detectives and cops and stuff, but
They're
down
focusing on the wrong things.
Yeah, they're focusing on the wrong things because of their downfalls, and that also leads to what Adam says and Claudia says, how like you can't really change how you're molded and like stuff like that, because even being the best detectives that they are, they're still their downfall is still their
You're still
character.
destined to
Massive
do
blind
what you would do.
spots.
Yeah.
I think Aegon is the purest character.
He's driven by his desires. People know how he'll act because they know his
Exactly.
desires.
We aren't free in what we do because we aren't free in what we want.
Yeah.
I think Chris, you may have started down the track of saying it, but Jonas and Marta hook up for the first time at this party.
Yes,
Oh,
they go
yeah.
upstairs and they're both wearing white actually while they're
Yeah.
doing this whole thing. So there's like
The age of
with all
innocence.
the color theory, if you're
Yeah.
gonna say white is very virginal and innocent, and so
To not
that's-
get into theory too
Yeah.
much, the love between Jonas and Martha kind of seems to be one of the few love conundrums in the series.
Oh yeah, it's
where
definitely a
it's-
paradox.
It's the only paradox that has to do with love. You know, I can't think of another one where
of like where the relationship began.
Yeah.
You mean?
yeah.
Yeah.
Like the feelings developed for each other itself is a bootstrap paradox.
Right.
I don't think that occur. Like other
No,
things
Han-
are objects.
Yeah, Hannah meets young Mikkel. That does, that's
Yeah.
pretty organic.
Yeah.
I see what you're getting at.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's kind of a manufactured love.
Well, and
Um,
I would agree. And then the episode ends with Michael taking the letter from that Jonas showed him that he had the suicide letter, and writes his own letter from that, which I think is very interesting.
Which this is when we see him open his desk drawer and all of the paper that he uses to write that letter on. The paper that he uses to write that letter on comes back as all pretty much all the letters that we see written are written on that paper.
Yes, and then it cuts to Claudia leading Jonas through the cave, and Adam crying as he holds a St. Christopher necklace, implying that he still has feelings for Marta.
Yeah, because in the sex scene, Marta gives Jonas the little pendant that they found, and she had put it on a black cord for him. So
Was it black or red?
it was black.
It's black.
Yeah.
But it comes red.
The reason you're thinking red is because the penny on the red thread looks identical to it,
okay.
and I think that's on purpose.
And then Magnus and Francesca say that we all make sacrifices.
Oh, that's where it is. That's
how
where
it
it says,
is.
"Why couldn't you just tell him the truth?" And-
Yeah.
That's like the last scene.
Yeah.
You could have told him what his task in all of this is, what path you really sent him on, and Adam just says there's not much longer to the last cycle, like brushes him off, and then Francisca says we all must make sacrifices, Magnus. So that's when you find out for sure that he's
that's
Magnus.
Yeah.
But also fantastic casting, because then they cut to like just a close up on his face, and you're like, oh yeah, I totally see that now.
Oh, I called it was Magnus before they said, and just because he looked so much like.
Oh,
it.
and when you see him
Francesca
and
didn't
her
look as much like it, but the Magnus casting was really
right,
good.
seeing him, you're like, okay, that can only be Francisca based on that guy has to be Magnus. Yeah.
All right, you guys ready for episode 7,
Yeah.
second to last episode, of
Device
season
and
2?
Teufel,
The White Devil.
Good stuff.
We've talked about a little bit.
Yeah,
of
I
this
think
a lot already.
we've kind of bled
Yeah.
into it a little bit, but I'm sure there's stuff we missed.
Adam is looking at. Oh, this is the one where it opens with him looking at that Fall of the Damned painting again. Michael casting angels and Michael casting souls into hell. And this is when like all the characters are haunted by people that they've lost or whatever. Adam sees Marta in her white dress from the night that they had sex, from the Jonas and Marta had sex. Hannah is being haunted by Ulrich. And who is it? Who's the other one? Katerina is being haunted by Mikkel. Those are the 3 that we see.
We also find the coroner starts talking about Claudia saying that her body is contaminated heavily with radiation,
Yes, the coroner
implying that
finds.
she's done a shit ton of time travel.
Yep, they find, and that's when Egon remembers her as being there before, and he sees the different color eyes again, and it really kind of shakes him a little bit.
And I think that's also in this episode when Egon shows the photo to Helga, and Helga says she's the White Devil, she's going to kill everybody.
Yeah.
In 1954.
And then he's like, she's dead, she won't hurt you. And then he's like, oh, dude, she hasn't even started
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah,
right?
dude. Egon's shook by
Like,
that,
what
too.
do you mean, the child?
Egon definitely had the most evidence shoved in his face out of anyone.
like non-stop evidence just
Yeah.
coming at him from the wrong time.
Yeah.
And
He's
then
just like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
Also in that scene, Helga's wearing yellow and his mom is wearing blue.
Okay, all right.
Colors
color, man.
of the rainbow.
And then because Claudia knows that Egon's going to die in 1987, she's trying to kind of get him to move in with her so she can try to at least protect him or something.
The clock in Egon's house is at 11:05 in that scene.
Bingo.
Yeah, another 11:05. Love it.
And then we get to 2020 where Clausen confronts Alexander, which I think is the most ridiculous
It is bullshit.
evidence for an accusation and arrest. He says that
He's looking at his passport, right?
he's looking at his passport for Alexander Kohler, and it says that he's 5'8", and then he looks at Alexander and says, "You look like you're 5'6", so I'm arresting you for fraud."
Yeah, he's like,
yeah.
where'd those 4 centimeters go? Where'd those 2 inches go? I'm gonna arrest you on identity theft.
He knew
Hannah-
his brother was
dude,
5'8".
Hannah takes the frickin' time machine back to 1954.
Yes.
Like impersonating to be Ulrich's wife.
Yeah, she says that she's Katarina Nielsen to Egon in
Oh.
order to get back there to meet with Ulrich.
And that scene, man, just like the amount of hope Ulrich has.
Yeah, she just rips
and
it away from
just
him.
Fucking like takes it from him because he like
yeah.
mentions his family. He's like, how's my wife? Like my kids? She's like, not about me, motherfucker.
When she also takes the name of Katarina Nielsen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Doesn't Aegon say something like, "Oh, aren't you are you related to Agnes?"
Yeah,
Nielsen?"
he says like, "Oh, Nielsen, that's kind of an uncommon name. Do you know Agnes Nielsen?"
Yeah,
and she goes,
she's like, "No relation."
She's like,
I'm
"No,
from,
I don't
a
know
town over.
Yeah. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
That was the ultimate Katarina getting one back over on Hannah, because Hannah when she goes in and absolutely savages Katarina with the whole I broke off the thing, and Ulrich actually said that he loves me and that he doesn't love you anymore, and he wanted to leave you.
I
And
wanted to punch her.
oh,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
maybe
That
the
was
worst thing I've ever
aggravating.
seen a person do. But Katerina says to her, Katerina says to Hannah, I can't remember when exactly it is, but she says, like, he'll always choose me and his family over you.
Yeah.
He'll never choose you. And when she goes back to the 50s, he sees her and he calls her, he says, is it really you or is it an angel? Like, are you an angel? And then right after that, she says, yeah, it's really me. And he goes, well, what about Katerina? What about...
Yeah, but the
It's also interesting that Hannah ends up in 53 if she started in 2019.
54.
Or whatever, yeah, 54, because she started in 2020. So did she jump back twice? Because the thing only goes 33 years. So she would have had to go to 86 and then go back again to 53 or 54.
I guess we're under the assumption she doesn't really know how it works, and she might have accidentally clicked twice.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying you'd have to do it twice. You can't go a full 66 years.
Alex, I didn't even realize that the first time round. That's so right. So
she
may
have gone to
down.
87 first.
Shit may
Yeah.
have
She
gone
knows,
down. I think she would have had to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's already been to 87. So, like, maybe she's been plotting. She's like, oh, I know a way to get to 54.
Yeah.
All I have to do is jump twice.
Oh, and then, this is...
Katerina
this is
breaks
also-
in on...
right before that, Hannah is like, oh, that's not my husband. And then Aegon and her are back in the office, and Aegon asks her, all right, so, like, that's not your husband. Are you heading out? Hannah's like, no, I think I'll stay. I want a new start.
Yeah.
And she,
And then
like,
they
whips
share
out
a cigarette.
and he's like, boom, I got that lighter for you, baby.
They share a very interesting look.
Yeah, very interesting look. And I think that's the last time we see Hannah for the rest of the season.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the last we see of Hannah and that
Aegon.
age Egon.
How about that scene between Ulrich and Hannah, where he's put yourself in your shoes.
He's been in a mental hospital just being drugged in a straitjacket for 8 months.
Well, he says, "Are you an angel? Or are you real?" And then
More angel symbolism, which is interesting.
I think we already maybe
White
talked about
devil.
it in the previous episode, but he immediately asks about Katerina and his children, kind of before Hannah can answer, and
When I like the response that she has to him is the same response essentially that he says to her when he breaks things off with her or whatever. He says, like, she only cares about herself. She doesn't need anyone but herself. And she kind of flips that on him and says, you told me I don't need anyone but myself.
Yeah.
And now you need me.
His own words against him.
And the
absolutely.
stranger also said that to her before she stole the time machine from him because he realized that she had been cheating on his dad.
Oh,
And so he says to her also, like, you don't need anyone, you only need yourself. Like, you're...
Interesting, yeah.
Which, that also comes up with Claudia because Egon says to her that to Claudia that she's
That's in this
always been
episode too,
selfish and that it's not all about her or that whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, and then back in 2020, we also Clausen is interviewing Alexander and says that he received a letter from someone, and we don't really know who sent him this letter, saying that lies and betrayal are in Winden, and you can find answers about your brother. So there's that clearly has some type of connection.
Sent by a
source.
friend.
I'm so interested to figure out who that person is, who sent
And
that
how this
letter.
connection has any bearing on the story.
Yeah,
And
that's
lo-
season 3 material right there.
And like I was saying, that the paper that letter is on is the same paper that the letter that Michael's suicide is on.
Oh.
Further
Same.
into your theory.
Mm-hmm.
In 2020 as well, Marta early in the episode finds the St. Christopher medallion on her pillow.
That the stranger left there.
Um,
yeah, she's like, I
and-
know he's here or
And
something.
Bartosz had previously told the group that Jonas would return eventually. And so now she's like, oh my God, where is he? And he finally meets her, but she realizes that it's the older stranger Jonas.
Mm-hmm.
Does she meet him in this episode?
Yeah, and they are about to make out, and then Katerina busts down the door and says, "You're a sick
shit,
bastard.
yeah.
Don't
Did he
bang
tell
your
you?
aunt."
Did he
Hast
tell
du
you?
dir gesagt?
Yeah.
Like, oh my
I'm his
God.
grandmother,
Yeah,
and you're his aunt.
She straight up, she blows up so quick to Marta, like, your brother's alive.
Yeah.
One, he's in a different time, and he's your like boyfriend / lover's father. So
Yeah.
you're his aunt. So stop doing what you're
And
doing.
Jonas is just like, yo, you cock blocking
Yeah.
bitch.
Yeah, for real.
So you
Man,
cock
I waited
blocking
33
bitch.
years for this.
I've been literally dreaming about it. It's the only dream I have.
Oh man, and I wake up angry every time.
Yeah.
I think this episode
Oh,
Aegon also go for it, Alex.
I was just gonna say when Katarina breaks into that house to like rip Marta away, she breaks in using a red crowbar.
Okay.
you.
That's all I had.
I like the colors though. I like the colors. Aegon tells Claudia, "Yo, I know what's going on. I know that time travel is real." Claudia freaks out. She's like, you're wrong. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And then I think it's the first time in Aegon's life he starts to feel like he has some sort of full understanding of what's going on.
Well, because she's not fully like shutting him down at that point, because that's during the like
Car ride back.
that's during the chemo and the car ride back, and so he's like realizing that she's not shutting him down. So he's like,
What do
you
know
you
that I
like
don't?
you like believe me, right?
Yeah.
So I must be on the right track because like
The interesting thing too is there's the parallel between both of them. Like Aegon started out as a good cop and then kind of devolved into like a drunk that had shitty stuff happen in his life. And Claudia started out as like the businesswoman that was the first woman ever CEO, and she kind of devolves into this person who's like pawning everyone around. And I mean, not necessarily a bad way, but she's a puppeteer. And it's kind of the evolution of her going from good to bad, and him going from good to bad also. And
Going
so
back
it's
to
kind of like-
Aegon real quick, he knows the term the White Devil because
Helga.
Was Helga when he was younger?
Yeah, so that scene was actually kind of weird for me in that like saying who the White Devil was kind of ambiguous because he basically shows it's after Helga returns from his time travel thing.
Right.
Because it's in season 2, so it's in June of whenever. And Aegon goes over and asks him a question because it's right after Claudia has been murdered by Noah, excuse me. And so he takes the picture of her dead body over to the kid and says, "Was this like the person who kidnapped you?" Because they're still operating under the assumption that Ulrich and an accomplice, some unknown accomplice, had kidnapped the kid.
Yeah.
And that's when.
That's when the
That's when-
term White Devil makes it a second appearance. Almost, is he's like, he's asking, do you know anything about the White Devil? Like, is that your
hang on, let me
is
read
that
it.
your partner?
Let me read it because I actually have it.
Well,
I do want to. I want to talk about Claudia. I think is a key player in season 1. I want to talk about her puppeteering, but
Yes.
yeah.
Specifically for that scene where the White Devil thing is revealed. First of all, Greta, Helga's mother, is in a blue shirt and Helga's in a yellow shirt.
Oh,
So there's
you and
that.
your
Nice.
colors.
I literally took down every time there was blue, red, or yellow in a scene. It was fantastic. Aegon shows him the picture of dead Claudia. Helga says, "He told me about her, the White Devil."
Yeah.
He told me about her, period. The White Devil, period. And then he's like, whatever. And she goes, he says, "She wants to kill us all." And he goes, "She's dead. She can't hurt you." And he goes, "No, she hasn't even started yet."
Yeah.
Cut to whatever the next thing is.
Yeah, crazy.
Cut to Claudia, middle Claudia, going to Egon's house, and the clock is at 11:05.
Well,
There it is.
11:05.
Believes me, essentially.
Well, and then once they get
Great
back to
point,
his
Alex,
house, and then once they get back to his house, he says that he wants the cave searched, and that's when she's like, "No, we have to stop this," and she starts freaking out at him, and then he realizes that.
that she knows
so
more
much
than
of a part of it,
and
yeah.
keeping
and he
secrets
says
from
his whole quote about the she's never changed. All that she ever cared about was herself, and she has no heart.
Yeah.
And then he falls and breaks his head, and then as she's about to call 911, or she calls 911, and then when they ask what's wrong, she hangs up the phone and says, "There will be sacrifices. Everything will happen as it always has. If it does, she will live, Regina." Which is what older Claudia said to her right before she disappeared.
And that's when Egon whispers,
"You are the White Devil."
"Yeah, du bist der weiße Teufel." Oh, so as he's like,
And then, and then she
Last
like,
breath.
there's
Literally.
as they're struggling for the phone, he like falls, hits his head, and
hits
dies,
head and just bleeds out.
which, I mean, shit. What a way to go out.
He finally
way to go out.
Finally figured
it out.
everything out.
He had all the pieces.
That was like
Because I mean, the Helga missing case and the Mads missing case were the two things that haunted him basically the entire time.
Yeah.
At what point do you think? Because all that
And the Ulrich stuff as well.
Yeah.
all the newspaper clipping or the newspaper that she saw on the computer said was that
He was found dead in
he
his
was
house.
found dead. At what point do you think Claudia realized that she has to kill him?
Well, that was her whole thing. I don't think she realized it until
After.
until after it happened.
Until as soon as she called 911. I don't think she realized
was like,
it.
"Oh, this had to be the way that it was." Like her whole the whole reason she's trying to get him out of that house is that if he's not in his apartment, he can't be found dead in his apartment. So let's move him out immediately. And obviously, self-fulfilling prophecy, by trying to affect it, she caused it to happen.
Yeah.
Well, and then the last scene of the episode is that she goes home and she's like freaking out, trying to clean her hands, and the Jonas that walked into the caves with old Claudia last episode has lived for now a year or so, or however long, training with her and everything, and comes in and says, "Now that old Claudia's dead, I have to show you what's going on."
The Jonas that went and kissed Marta at the lake has lived from that 2019 all the way through a full year, apparently training with old Claudia during that time, and now has to pass his knowledge along to middle Claudia.
I'm sorry, Alex. Can you repeat the time frame where Jonas is training with older Claudia?
So when our Jonas that we know from season 1 travels from 1921 to 2019 to try and stop his father, after he is unable to stop his father, and after he initiates the romance with Marta by kissing her so passionately, he then seemingly
gets taken by older Claudia, and she says everything, all the pieces are in their place, and she takes him into the cave, and that's the end of the episode.
But we don't know where they went to.
We don't know what they do.
All we know is that in 2020.
1987 when he goes and
1987
Claudia, he has a healed neck. I saw
it has been that intervening year, because he jumped 98 years instead of 99 years, so he lived that full year to get to 2020, a year older.
And that's how he could jump back to the time frame, because it's a 33-year time of the machine. Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification. And Andrew, you were saying, I think that was the end of so now we're just on episode 8. The season finale, last episode.
Wow.
Let's go.
Crazy shit.
I can't believe we're here already.
Unbelievable.
And
so
season 2, episode 8, endings and beginnings.
What was the
Alpha and Omega was the season 1.
And the first episode of this season was beginnings and endings as well. So that's interesting.
Wow. Beginnings and ends was
is that
which the
I think.
No, the season 2 episode 8.
Season 2 episode 8 is endings and beginnings,
Yeah.
but season 2 episode 1 is beginnings and endings.
Really?
And season 1 episode 10 is Alpha and Omega. So there's a lot of beginning and end stuff.
Oh, you're right. It's endings. My bad.
No worries.
Damn, Sam.
Okay, so season 2 episode 8 opens with older Elizabeth in 2053. Oh, go ahead, Andrew. You have something?
I was just gonna say never mind. One of the other episodes in season 1 was called Past and Present.
Well, there you go. What was that? The second or third episode?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The third episode. Yeah. There's also Lost and Found season 5.
There you go.
Season 2 episode 5.
Now we're stretching it a little bit. So Elizabeth, we see old Elizabeth in 2053, and she has her hands out in the falling ash of apocalypse times, which is kind of similar to the shot of Claudia in the season 1 finale, standing in the woods, holding the ashes.
Which I'm still confused on how she got there.
Yeah, that was weird. I was interested in that. Although she had been back and forth to the future a couple times, because that's where her bunker was, where she was looking at all the pictures anyway. So if she had the machine,
but she didn't have the machine at that time. She gave it to Hooded John. But I mean, we'll figure it out later. Sorry.
Fair.
Yeah. And she's looking through her memento box.
Yes, which that box that she has buried in the woods that has all of her shit in it.
What color is it?
It's not about the color. It's although there is yellow paint on it. The
truth comes out.
But the point is that box itself was the box for the nature video camera that Claudia takes to get the evidence of Peter
Well,
traveling
and
traveling the night of Mikkel's
Elizabeth
death.
saw her do that too, so that's an
Yeah.
interesting connection. Like young Elizabeth saw her do that.
Oh,
So it's
she
interesting.
knew where like a resource was.
Yes.
And wow, that's pretty impressive. Because that was probably in like a remote part of the forest that maybe like post-apocalyptic people don't live in. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and then inside her memento box has a picture of Charlotte, and she like rubs her, or like a picture of the Doppler family: Peter, Charlotte, Elizabeth, and Francesca, and she's kind of like rubbing Charlotte's face, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And then there's also the fox hat and a photo of Charlotte with Noah,
Yeah.
which confirms that Charlotte and Noah are the parents of. Or
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth and Noah are the parents of Charlotte.
Yes. Well, and the Elizabeth that has that baby is not burnt out yet,
Mhm.
and then this Elizabeth that we see is all
Burnt up.
scarred up and stuff.
Yeah.
She's only like half scarred though, and she also has like one milky eye and one
Yeah.
not milky eye.
But
So there's
how-
kind of like a heterochromia thing there,
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
some kind of symbolism
Yeah,
with
so
that.
how does
Like
she?
forced.
She either goes through time travel a lot as post Charlotte baby.
So my thing is, I think that Adam is lying to Jonas about time travel causing the scars because Claudia travels just as much and doesn't have all that scarring.
That's true.
I think there's some kind of explosion that Adam and Elizabeth are a part of because they both are scarred in like a kind of similar like melty burn way. So it'd be interesting to see if like that was all one event.
Are there any theories, and this is a far stretch, that Adam is actually an older version of Noah?
That would be interesting.
But the problem is young Noah died, but yeah.
well, yeah, that's true.
Or middle-aged Noah dies, but
Yeah, now I mean, I guess if you buy into the whole,
But we've seen people die time and time again and
haven't
then
seen them
reappear.
Well, we've
haven't
seen
them
Marta
been
die.
older than that.
That's a good
that they
point.
died, though.
Yeah.
he also died on camera. It wasn't like he died off screen.
Well, we
like
see Marta die on screen. So I'm just saying, if
Right.
we're going along that line,
Yeah.
I mean,
That's very
well,
true.
just because
Fair.
It could be
the only
alternate
reason why I
universe
bring that up
person.
is because older Elizabeth is scarred and stuff, and they were married, so
That's
potentially
a
it could
good
be,
thought.
but I don't know.
There's definitely potential there. Absolutely.
Also, I think I messed up earlier, but it's in this episode where older Noah is talking to younger Noah, saying, "I can't tell you what I'm about to do."
In
Oh,
the-
okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a very similar conversation to
Yeah.
the one that they had in that other when
Yeah.
you brought it up the first time.
Yeah.
It was like pretty much the same thing, but yeah.
It was a little cock tease.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, this is also where Jonas points the gun at Martha for the first time.
and forces her to go into the bunker.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Says,
Hooded
"No,
Jonas
nah,
did.
bitch, you're fucking getting in that bunker." like in a really aggressive manner. I mean, I
He's
guess
like,
he doesn't want her to die,
yeah.
but you gotta learn by now, man. You just can't do things because it's gonna end up the same way it has occurred.
So this is my problem that I have with that scene specifically is that the Jonas that we know is supposedly a younger version of this stranger middle-aged guy, right? So shouldn't the middle-aged version of himself know that like he can't really change anything? So why even try to do this whole Marta thing?
I don't think younger Jonas
Might be a
doesn't
different
know
universe.
that older Jonas tries to save Marta in that way. So imagine you're young Jonas. You see Marta
I guess that's
die.
true.
When you grow older, when you're 33 years older,
You're gonna try to make
gonna
her
try
not
to
be in that
save-
house.
You're gonna try to save Marta.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is true because young Jonas actually didn't see her, or didn't know that his older self was already
Try
there
to put her in the bunker.
because
Yeah.
because young Noah
Opens the
comes
door.
through the
Yeah.
well, young Noah first comes through the church through the like he time travels through the church to
Right.
get to
Right.
the 2020s
he
and then
basically lets her out of the bunker.
well Peter and
Oh, I'm sorry, Peter and Charlotte do that.
but what he does
Peter
is
and
he
Elizabeth.
goes to the Convald house and gives stranger Jonas the letter allegedly from Marta, also on the same paper as the other two letters
Oh yeah,
we've seen
and they
so
never
far.
tell us what's in the letter. Right?
No, he just
says,
sees it and says, "Oh, that's impossible." And then young Noah says,
Here's what you have to do to stop it.
"Yeah, you have to go save Francisca, Magnus, and Bartosz,
Yeah.
and then later me and Agnes," is what he says.
But I think there's also, and I'm not sure if this was intentionally said this way or if I just misinterpreted it. But the the young Jonas that had trained with Claudia, says to, in 1987, Claudia, the middle-aged Claudia, the passage was closed, but the cycle wasn't broken. And then he says the grand scheme can't be changed, but the details can. And then he says we change a grain of sand and change the whole world. So it's kind of interesting because he says like the things can't be changed, but we can change stuff, and it changes the world, but things can't change. So it's kind of an interesting like saying things can change, but things can't change.
Yeah, there's something with that. The whole big and small things don't abide by the same laws. Maybe nothing big can be altered, but small things can. So maybe that's the theory that like what we're seeing is loops within loops, and maybe you can change a tiny loop within the larger loop as long as the larger loop's outcome isn't affected by it. So that's kind of interesting.
But what's to say what's the largest loop?
I think
that's the point. I think
Claudia in this episode explicitly tells Jonas that, hey, we can't change everything but grains of sand.
Yeah.
And says that, hey, I was told, or I know that you sent older version of me in here to like end the loop, but it just created it again. And she's like, you just have to change this one part of the equation, and it'll work this time. Like one grain of sand can change.
Right, and so the question becomes like, is that part of the loop that we're already seeing, and this attempt at changing it is just further cementing what we already know, or are they actually changing it this time, and that's why it's the last cycle instead of just the next cycle or whatever?
So, Clausen hands Alexander that search warrant, or gets a search warrant for the power plant, and that really freaks out Alexander Tiedemann.
Yeah,
and he calls up Voller.
Well, Voller's there with Clausen when he brings him the thing.
I'm sorry, he's in the. I thought he was at the police station. He's not there yet, but he's like, we have to do it, and Voller says maybe it's better if the truth comes out.
Yeah.
And I don't remember completely. Is it the article that popped up in the newspaper a couple episodes ago? It said that they were looking for two individuals, like the two suspects were still on the run from 33 years ago.
Yeah.
From a neighboring town. Like, I'd be willing to bet that Voller, I don't know. Might be the other guy.
Ooh, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
See, I was thinking that there was some kind of like Alexander Tiedemann, who was Boris Niewald or whatever, was working with Alexander Kohler, and they were like bank robbers or something. Because that's why Boris had both of their passports, like they were working together, and he died somewhere along the way maybe, and he just stole his identity. But we never see where that guy goes.
I like Colby's theory right there.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that there would be two people, because that's how they have such a close relationship as well.
Yeah.
Because they both know something damning about the other person.
Yeah.
So I don't recall that, but they definitely say there are two people, or Clausen says there are two people still on the run.
Yeah. From Marburg, yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's like that news article in some newspaper.
Yeah. And their passports say Marburg on them.
Yeah, they're originally from Marburg.
We know Boris Niewald is from that town, but we don't know about Voller.
Right.
But it could be.
Also in this episode is Noah telling Adam that he's a son of a bitch. Son of a bitch, Adam. You've been lying to me this whole time. I'm going to try to shoot you. And lo and behold, Noah's like, Noah pulls out the gun, and Adam's like, I have no fear. This gun won't go off. He doesn't explicitly say that, but he's not panicked at all, almost as if he knows his story doesn't end there. So he just stands there, and Noah pulls the trigger and nothing happens. The gun is jammed, and then who comes up behind Noah? Agnes. What does she do? She shoots him in the frickin' chest.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah.
Magnus, Francisca, and Agnes all walk in, and that's when Noah realizes, like, oh, I fucked up. They already knew that this was going to happen. And then
older Magnus and Francisca.
Yes.
Yeah. I was like, wait a second, I don't remember that.
Killed her own brother.
Noah says an interesting thing in that as well. Because he says that when he got the pages, he says, "You're not waging a war against God. You're waging it against humanity. Here are the last pages. You used me. You had me do all these things, but I know what I must do now." And that's when he tries to shoot him.
And then Adam says to him, "Claudia was right. Noah, you never knew how to play the game."
Yeah.
And then he says, "Charlotte is Elizabeth's mother and daughter. There is no man without guilt. none have earned a place in your paradise, which kind of leads back to Elizabeth talking about the paradise. So clearly this paradise thing wasn't necessarily from Adam. It was it was an invention that Noah kind of...
Well, I think because the whole idea is like the bunker being Noah's Ark, and so you're shepherding these people basically around the apocalypse to survive in the new paradise that they're going to bring post-apocalypse, which we'll see what that actually is, or if they're all just being manipulated.
And then something I found earlier that was interesting was Bartosz is talking with Magnus and Francesca and says that Katharina took the time travel device that Bartosz had. And I think that, and he says that that's not right. That's not the way like Noah told me it would happen. So then he goes to look for it. So I find maybe that's interesting. Maybe I'm not sure if Noah intentionally didn't tell him about this or if it's something that's different from the cycles before, because then Katharina goes through the cave and sees that big light, but I've talked about that before. And then one other thing, Claudia gives Bartosz a picture of Claudia and Regina from 1986, and that kind of encourages Regina to go to the bunker and save herself rather than just die of whatever's going on.
There's also the specific scene between Jonas and Claudia in the passage when he's like restarting the tunnel. He basically says like, it took me ages to accept having to be part of the disaster I wanted to destroy, or I wanted to prevent. And she asked him how he knows all of this, and he said, in the last 12 months, you taught me everything about the past and the future, everything that happened and everything that will happen. There are two sides out there. Adam and Sigmundus want to create a new world. You and I want to save this one. So there's interesting conversation there. And then it cuts to Adam holding an oxygen mask and watching a clock tick to 11:05.
So
there it is.
At one point, young Jonas and Claudia exit the caves in 2020, the day before the apocalypse, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know what happens with Jonas, and we'll talk about it, but I don't recall what happens with Claudia later that episode.
She goes down to the bunker.
Yes.
She goes down to the bunker. So then the 1987 version of Claudia is in the bunker with Regina from 2020, Peter, Elizabeth, and then Noah walks in right at the end.
Okay, great.
And I think there's going to be one more person in that bunker because the words on the wall of the bunker that we see in like the 50s and in 2019 says six personen on the wall. It's like a 6-person bunker, and we've only seen 5 people in the bunker at the end of the apocalypse. So I'm thinking maybe one more gets added in.
At the very end.
Yeah.
And then
who else would be in that timeline at that time not doing something that we know of?
So my theory is that it's going to be someone from the alt world.
Okay.
Because when Jonas sets up the time machine in the tunnel passage and like turns it on, instead of making like the black hole, it does like the white light vortex thing and is like restarting the tunnel, and you even see like the white light vortex coming through the bunker when Marta is stuck in there before she breaks out and goes to find...
Yeah, like startles her,
Yeah, so she sees that, and then it cuts away from that vortex. So, and then the next time we see her in there, it's when Peter and Peter and Elizabeth open the door, and she runs out.
Yeah.
So, what did she see? Was like, did something crazy happen in the bunker in between those two times? Is it the same Marta that we knew from before, or did like some portal open up there? Like, who knows? Essentially,
Yeah.
as well.
I think that the time machine chair were just failed experiments, right? That they had to keep doing every time the loop got reset, essentially, and so they had to keep killing those kids, and they had to keep putting the bodies elsewhere.
And what was it? What was
So
it
it would
with
fit
their
in with the
eyes? Why
timeline.
was that it was like the
just
most
having
connected to the brain or
Right.
something?
well, I think just the machine being strapped across their eyes like that, when it introduces the electromagnetic field, it essentially just like burns out their eyes and completely fucks up their eardrums. And it's the way that the morgue lady talks about how the eardrums are damaged, she says that it's as if they were like spun in a centrifuge or something like that.
It's like the birds that
And the sheep too.
that Charlotte,
Yeah.
young
Yeah.
Charlotte finds, and then older Charlotte subsequently finds.
But that's the
we don't know anything about the science behind that, though, where they're like, oh, we have to do it around the brain for this reason.
I'm sure it's just
No.
something that's
just a
integral
sick fucking
for
machine.
Jordan,
Yeah.
were you suggesting that
Mundus.
like the children needed there were necessary? It was necessary that children died during each cycle.
Yeah, well, I was saying that because I mean, and this is like once you've watched the entire show and you know everything. Yeah, essentially, you privy to everything that's happened so far. The way that I was reading it was that everything had to happen in the same way. Adam needed everything to essentially everything to happen in the same manner that it was started in, and so a part of that kind of loop was this failed time machine. It was in the 50s. When was the chair?
That bunker is in the 80s with
The
that
80s.
chair, and the way that it is explained by Adam to Jonas in season 2 is that
Each time the cycle
passes, there seems to be some way to pass information from one cycle to the next. I think that's the loophole that we've been talking about, that they've been talking about consistently in the show, and the time machine in the bunker is like the prototype version of the time machine that we're getting. So like with every iteration of the cycle, it gets one step further progressed. The timeline, the time machine becomes one step more like closer
My
to functional,
understanding is
more effective.
The chair machine, time machine, is not effective.
Well, you could argue that it
modified.
does because the chair has to be used to kill these children because there are dead children in the 50s.
Yeah.
That
So
affects
somebody
the-
has to die in the 80s to
Yeah.
be in the 50s.
Yeah.
So you have to kill these kids.
Yeah.
That's the whole determinism of this universe is the future already exists the way that it is, so the past has to go the way that it goes.
Yeah.
You
No,
can't
I-
change anything because the
I
future
totally,
already
but
exists.
it didn't have to be in the chair manner, right?
Well, that's
Like,
the iteration that they had.
That's
yeah,
what, that's what happened.
Yeah, that is what happened. But
And no-
theoretically,
and-
it's just like they could have like killed the kids and brought their bodies
Right,
to
and
this other
dropped them
time zone.
anywhere,
Like,
right.
Maybe.
you know,
Who knows?
I mean, have
Yeah.
we seen Adam in the 80s? Is there a chance that this is Noah, like, or Adam having been stuck without a time machine somewhere? Noah building this?
Oh, I think Adam gets probably stuck in the
Last time we see
That's
him,
interesting.
he's in 2019 or 2020.
Yeah.
right.
And
But
that's the
I
other
think
thing. This isn't the first iteration of the time machine, right? This is Tannhaus made the time machine
I think Tannhaus
earlier.
I think Tannhaus's time machine is a
Iteration.
Blueprint
further, but it's a further development on the original chair time machine.
So Martha Mata
Martha.
runs out of the bunker and runs straight to Jonas's house,
Yes.
right? At which point, younger Jonas
Is
and-
there looking for Hannah?
Yeah,
Because he says he needs to find his mother and then he needs to find Hannah. So why is he he's looking for Hannah and then he's looking for Martha. So
Yeah.
why is he looking for Hannah in the first place?
yeah,
But then Martha shows up at his house first while he's there,
yeah.
and then they have their like beautiful
I
reunion.
think Does
I think he wants
Claudia-
to save his mom?
Does Claudia does
From the
Claudia
apocalypse.
say you need to
Maybe.
go save your mother, or no? Claudia wouldn't know because
No,
it's
she-
87 Claudia.
Yeah, he.
Right.
That's a good
sh-
question,
She
Alex.
asks, what are you doing, or like, well, what am I supposed to be doing? What are you doing? And he says, you go to the bunker because you need to survive.
Yeah,
I have to go find my mother and find Marta.
yeah.
And that's all we know of, like, why he's
That's
looking
a
for
great
Hannah.
Question: Why he's looking for Hannah? I think maybe Colby's is the simplest answer. It's his mom. He
He's trying
wants
to save his mom.
Yeah.
Fair.
It's
'Cause
the thing
true-
that he puts
does-
her above
Doesn't
Martha,
he?
though.
Doesn't he also see
It
her
might be subconscious.
on like a cross when he's walking through the graveyard field outside the church in the future? Does he see her name?
Her name's on one.
Hannah?
Yeah, so he.
No, Hannah. No,
No,
Marta.
Hannah's not.
No,
Martha.
Marta
But
is.
yeah, okay, so
not Hannah.
we still need more clear answers as to why that's the case.
Yeah.
But here comes arguably the biggest point in the series so far. When Martha Mata walks into the house and finds Jonas there, then they're like doing their little lovey-dovey, like hair touching, whatever. Older Adam walks in, and
He says, and so the circle is
Yeah.
closed.
Mhm.
All the game pieces are in position. They just need a push. The trigger is in all of us.
Which that's that push that he referenced
yeah,
in, what was that, episode 2? episode 3.
What is created today must occur so I can lead it to now. I am the trigger for what will make you only what I am today. Some pain you can't forget. You will carry this pain for the rest of your life until you are finally ready to let her go.
He says that right after he shoots her.
Mhm.
Yeah. And he's like looking over them, and Jonas is like freaking out. Martha's clearly like dying right in front of him.
And then he says, you can choose to stop me or you can try to save her. You'll know what you have to do.
Yeah. Oh, and he goes over and circles June 27th on the calendar as well, which closes that loop because when we see it in the 2050s, we see that date is circled on there. In fact, when the first season, or maybe when the second season originally came out and they showed that like burnt out 2050s calendar, they had they didn't have one extra day checked off, and then it was checked off like in the 2020s. And so people theorized like, oh, it's like an alternate world and blah, blah, blah. And they went back and like edited it in because they like fucked up and didn't mean to do that. So I thought that was like a funny thing that they like put that back in. It's like, oh, you guys can't be theorizing about alternate worlds yet.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I knew there was a theory about it. I didn't realize they went back and fixed it.
Yeah.
And so at that point, Adam just walks out the door.
Well, he says that Jonas can follow him and catch him or stay with Marta, and Jonas decides to stay with Marta.
But it's a quick. I mean, it's.
Well, I'm not sure. I don't know that I interpret it as like you can kill me right now. He says like you can try and stop me, as in like you can try and stop me from killing Marta, or you can try and stop me from like doing my ultimate plan, or you can try and stop me from killing Marta, but you can't do both.
Yeah.
Well, and I agree with that, but I also kind of took it as you can follow me and like come after me and try to get me, or you can stay here with Marta, and he again chooses to stay with Marta instead of chasing down Adam, who leaves. Which obviously I don't think like Adam thought. I again think it was in kind of the metaphorical sense, but I think it also in the literal sense he does the same thing.
When he also kind of presents him with the illusion of choice of like, oh, you can chase after me, or you can stay here with Marta, and then if he is the future Jonas himself, he would know that alternate world Marta comes and meets him right then. So saying like you can stay and save Marta, you can stay and be with Marta is like he legit will be, because she's going to come and save him.
We might have discussed it before, but one of the questions that is still out there is what happens to Adam after he walks out of the house, because the apocalypse is about to happen, right?
Right.
And
he doesn't have a time travel.
He doesn't have a way of getting anywhere.
Maybe
the tunnel's closed.
Well,
I guess if he is Jonas, he would know that he already just opened the tunnel back up, so the tunnel is again open.
Or maybe that was like, because he does say like, and thus the loop closes. So maybe he's like, this is where I die in this apocalypse, or he's the sixth person that goes to the bunker. Maybe he runs to the bunker and he's the number 6.
Yeah, wow. I didn't think about the bunker. The bunker is a plausible explanation, but that'll keep him in 2020 at least.
Yeah.
Right. That'll send him to
because those people survive
in
the
2020,
apocalypse.
and then in the trailer we see.
Well, because then that's in that time, post-apocalypse times is when middle Claudia is working on the God particle and trying to stabilize it to save people and go back in time. So maybe Adam is helping her at that point.
You know what, Alex? And that's probably how middle Claudia turns into old Claudia, because she just lives
from 2020 to 2053 in that post-apocalypse times.
Definitely, I think you're right.
I could see that.
And then the next obviously big thing that happens is Clausen is going through the plant to open up that reactor room.
Crazy
and
scene.
again, I don't think a warrant would let you dig into biohazard.
Although realistically, if you're looking for a ton of missing people and you see that like somebody just laid a bunch of cement in like a big pool, and you already were suspicious of that guy having killed somebody else, maybe his thinking was, I'm not going to find radioactive waste in here. I'm going to find the dead bodies of all these fucking people that are missing.
All based on 2 inches.
Yes. 4 centimeters, exactly.
So he jackhammers that open, and as soon as and Charlotte comes in yelling, don't do it, it's bad, because she knows what's going on, but she won't really tell him.
Yeah, she's like, this isn't about missing kids, it's about the past and the present and how everything is connected to itself and everything like that. And Clausen's like, no, this is our elephant. referencing back to his quote before,
Stupid
"This is our
quote.
elephant," and which is also an interesting reference to the Chernobyl meltdown and like one of
The elephant's toe.
foot in there or something
Yeah.
like that. That's like the most
Elephant's
radioactive
foot,
part
that's
of the whole
it.
thing. So that's like an interesting tie-in to some radioactive thing.
Yeah.
And
that's
so
interesting.
when he opens it up, this black material appears, and it starts like kind of floating in the air, and then that's kind of the end of the beginning right there, and a time portal opens up.
Is that the connection to another timeline when Charlotte touches her daughter in
Yeah.
the future?
It's a future, different timeline.
So that's pretty much like, I mean, not the end, but that's like as far as we know, by the end of season 2, that's kind of the end point of that timeline for us now. When she reaches through the portal, they dig up the radioactive waste.
Well, that's not the end of the timeline because that's in 2020, and we know that people exist in 2050. We just don't know who exists there.
Okay.
We just don't know where Charlotte and where Elizabeth went.
We do see right as the as that portal closes, as like the apocalypse happens, that
Charlotte gets pulled forward.
Charlotte
Yeah.
is pulled forward for like 2 frames,
Yeah.
and then it cuts.
In a very similar way to how Jonas was pulled forward
Right,
when
and
he goes
Helga.
through at the end of season 1.
And Helga,
Yeah.
him and Helga,
Okay.
yeah.
The other thing that I actually had a question about that is like when they bury it, because those barrels had been opened twice before that we'd seen, where Stranger Jonas had taken some dark matter out of it
And then
to
younger Jonas.
Put it in his time
to
machine.
put in his time machine and break the tunnel in the
Claudia.
first place in
Why
first
is
season
it
1.
that when they dig it up,
And then
I was-
and then younger Jonas takes some out to restart the portal in
Yeah.
season 2.
I was curious about this too because also when they open it in 2020, there's like rocks and stuff inside of it
Right.
that are like steeped with the oil.
Mhm.
But when they open it in the other times, it's just kind of a liquid. Or we don't.
Well,
really
you don't even
necessarily
see the inside
But
of
it doesn't
them.
look like it's rocks with just
Right.
liquid on top of it. It's like
I think
Dark.
Well, my thing was that I don't
they're
think the reason
breaking
that
concrete as well, right? I would assume that's the debris that you see
yeah,
in
it's
the
all because it's
black
just like
material.
it's all the irradiated stuff from that floor that was damaged by the
well, I know, but
accident
they
that
didn't
happens.
because they
They chip up the
chipped up the
concrete,
ground and
yeah.
then they open the tub. It's not like
Right.
they chip into the tub.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, but I'm saying the reason that the dark matter in 2020 actually becomes like a wormhole portal that Claudia and Elizabeth can see themselves through and doesn't the other 2 times is because it's in the spot of the one in 2050
Oh,
and both the one in 2050 and the one in 1921 are being stabilized by
Oh, okay.
the Doppler sisters. In fact, Elizabeth is doing it in 2053 and old Francisca is doing it in
yeah.
1921.
Wow.
And they're both stabilizing the wormholes in their times at the same time, right when they open the barrel and the other one, and that one is formed. You see the portal between 2020 and,
they-
2053.
Then Elizabeth and Charlotte touch through the portal.
They
at which
recognize each
point-
other because
They're
she
re- I
says
think
the whole
they're
mama
reaching-
thing.
They're reaching for each other, which is also parallel to the beginning of the episode when
She's rubbing the picture.
yeah, she has the photo and she's
Mhm.
like she's caressing the photo in
Oh,
the face of her mother.
Well,
I mean,
it's also
and
a parallel
and
to the
daughter.
Jonas reaching towards Helga.
Yeah.
As the
Right.
season finale of season
both
1.
both of which are references to the painting The Creation of Adam, which
Okay.
is the one where God is
Reaching
reaching
out,
down and
yeah.
touching Adam, and
Yeah.
they both kind of have their hands like
Yeah.
in the like limpish wrists
Yeah.
style of that painting.
So-
kind of reaching out afar.
Which, of course, it's called The Creation of Adam, that painting. So, like,
At,
come on.
at
Yeah.
that very moment, when the portal's open and they're reaching for each other, it suddenly starts to destabilize then. And
Yeah.
you see it for a split second, one scene, you're seeing Charlotte kind of, a force has pushed her towards the portal that's
Or
closing.
sucked
Or
her.
sucked her in,
Yeah,
either
sucked her
way,
in,
yeah. Which is, again, similar to the way we see Jonas get sucked in season 1 when he does the touching of Helga. They both get sucked in as well. So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
yeah.
So they're
And then-
clearly being jumped somewhere. We just don't know where.
Then the last kind of
Mhm.
mindfuck happens where
Jonas is
Jo-
caressing the dying
Oh
body.
well,
of
first
Marta.
Katerina is in the tunnel, and
Oh,
she's
big
opening
big
that
part.
door.
This is all happening at the same time.
Yeah.
too. It's
Well, because there's all the
rapid
cut
fire
scenes
Yeah.
that
It's literally
Dark
all
does.
montages. It's
Right.
insane.
Yeah.
the finale, the last 10 minutes of this episode, oh my god,
It's
amazing.
nuts. And yeah, so like as Charlotte and Elizabeth are touching each other through the portal, Katerina is also in the caves going through the Sigmundus Creatus S tunnel. And when she opens it, Well, because she follows because she gets to the red thread, but then she doesn't have the Geiger counter, so she can't like follow the radiation to where the actual tunnel is. But at that time, because of I guess what Jonas started doing in 87, yeah, that all the light particles, which he just refers to as that is time, are funneling
moving.
towards that tunnel. And then when she opens it, she sees a big bright white light, which normally every other time we've seen it opened is dark.
thing,
it's a very dark.
I thought
black
it was a
hole.
yellow light, but
It
might
was
be
like
what-
yellowish.
okay.
It was like yellowish white, and I agree. Thank you for that.
You were big on colors, and I was just
Yeah.
making sure.
Yeah, and so
Well,
who
that's
knows
what
where
that's what
she's
leads me
going.
to think that Katarina is going to be a huge part of season 3.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, and if you look at the some of the season
Trailer,
3
yeah.
trailer stuff,
You know that
You
she-
see her hands holding on to Ulrich's older hands over a chessboard.
right. When I was just thinking
Well,
even
See,
more,
I've kind of removed myself from watching any of the trailers just
Yeah.
because I kind of like to go into things raw.
yeah,
and
my
stuff.
only comment there was going to be that like the God particle in the alt world seems to be a white ball rather than a big black thing.
Oh,
So if Katarina is opening that
that
tunnel and it's white instead of black, maybe she's
Maybe
traveling
alternate
to the
world.
alternate world instead
Yeah.
of her
Yeah.
own timeline.
It's a great
Yeah.
point.
Well, and
she
then
still
the,
meets Ulrich. So.
and then the last huge thing that happens in this episode is as Jonas is caressing Marta's dying body, a much hotter version of Marta.
Yeah.
She
Jumps
likes the
in.
bangs.
The black hair and the bangs, and like a black trench coat jumps in, and she picks him up and basically says,
Like-
Adam, Jonas asks, "What time are
Oh,
you from?"
yeah, like,
And
how
"Oh,
is
what
this
time are we
possible?"
going to?"
yeah.
And she says, "Not what time."
What
But-
world?
Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause she said, he says, "What timeline are you from? Like, what are we doing?
Where
And
are we
she
going
goes,
or
yeah,
And the time machine that she has is a brand new device
Little
that,
orb thing.
that
yeah.
we've never seen in person, but we have seen a blueprint for
yes,
on Adam's wall down in his sick moon
And
bunker.
I was thinking about how every single time machine has black liquid and black light kind of like being utilized to signify that the time portal has been opened. In this, it's white light that's coming out of her time machine.
Yes.
That takes them to another
instead
universe.
of like the black ball that
Yeah.
consumes them and sends them
Yes.
to another time.
So it's the
very
first time
light
we're
colored.
introduced to multiple worlds, and then immediately we're shown that this potential other world is like not the same as the one we're in.
Yeah,
I didn't even notice that it was a different color. So
yeah.
that's
It's like an
interesting. It's a white
almost
color.
yellow
Oh, okay.
white light when it
Okay, that's
flashes.
interesting.
I would say it's yellow.
It
and
is.
that-
It is
yeah,
pretty yellow.
Yeah,
Okay,
that kind of
cool.
falls in line with Alex's color schema
Yeah.
kind of whole idea, whole series arc.
If we missed anything glaring, or even just minor
Please.
theories that you have, please
Yeah.
write into the email.
AJTT.thedarkcast@gmail.com.
Please, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna continue this throughout season 3.
Yeah, so
we'll
our-
have some reaction videos for you after
Each
the
episode, yeah.